Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm coming at you, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity, you imagination connoisseurs. This is Robservations 819. That's right, it's 819 episodes. I mean, that's just Robservations. There's a lot more on this channel. I'm kind of in an ornery mood tonight. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of letters to read. I want to start with a letter today. Normally, I don't start with a letter, but I got a letter in I wanted to start with. It's from our friend Joseph Weeks. Joseph Weeks writes in, and here's the subject heading of Joseph Weeks' letter. Joseph Weeks writes, how do I explain my movie fandom to a non-fan? Intriguing. Dear Viceroy of Verisimilitude, thank you for taking the time to read what I have to say. I am a massive movie fan, and there is nothing else that makes me happier than going to a packed Friday night showing of a new big movie. The levels of joy, excitement, community, and deep, soulful fulfillment that I receive on those nights is higher than I knew was possible. To help facilitate that feeling, I have a series of rules that I have set out for myself. The first is that it must be a showtime between 7 and 8 p.m. I must sit somewhere close to the middle of the row and be surrounded by a sea of fans on all sides. I must go to the most popular and crowded of my local theaters. And finally, I like to get to the movie early to soak in the atmosphere and stay after in the lobby for a while to continue soaking up that atmosphere. All of these rules could seem frustrating to someone who does not share my passion and need for the theatrical experience. They may not understand why I am so specific in my pursuit of chasing the best experience possible. So my question to you is, how do I explain to someone why and how the perfect theatrical outing makes me feel so good? I want to show and express my love in a way that makes sense to others that do not get the same satisfaction as me. I need to help them see why I so desperately need movies and movie-going. A missing piece within me is filled when I'm in a packed movie theater, and it would be nice to know how to tell others that in a less metaphorical sense. Thank you again for reading this and for all you do for the fandom in general. John Schnepp would be proud. Well, that's a very nice thing to say. I wouldn't be on YouTube if it wasn't for the great John Schnepp. He called me up one day and said, hey, I'm doing this show called AMC Heroes, and he had me on the 6th episode of that show, and I was on it for 3.5 years with him. That's the first time I met John Campea. I did that first show in April of 2015. Wow, that's 7.5 years ago, and here I am spouting off on YouTube. A lot of people ask me, why do I do it? I mean, they're like, Rob, you're working on films. I had dinner tonight with director Gabe Bologna, who directed Tango Shalom, and we're working on a new film called The White Devils right now that I'm finishing up post on it. And, it was interesting. Tango Shalom, this is a true story. Tango Shalom was actually blessed by the Pope, by Pope Francis. And from what I understand, it's the first time a Pope has ever blessed a movie. And it happened because Archbishop Machado, who was appointed by Pope John Paul II in the early 80s to foster interdenominational cooperation 40 years ago. And Archbishop Machado knew one of the actors in our film who has also worked to foster interdenominational cooperation. And because Tango Shalom is a movie about interdenominational cooperation, the Pope was made aware of it and ended up blessing the movie. It was in a newspaper that the Vatican publishes. Crazy, right? I don't know. I don't know why. That's just an aside. So I do other things and talk on YouTube, but I think one of the things that I enjoy about talking on YouTube, especially to everybody, is that I was first and foremost a fan. I grew up a fan. I really, I started watching Star Trek. My mom says I was 3. I had to have been 5 when it went into strip syndication, but I've been a fan my whole life. And the reason that I have been a fan is all of this stuff. And it started out really with Star Trek and the Twilight Zone and the few movies I'd seen when I was a kid. War of the Worlds, the original, the Byron Haskin directed War of the Worlds that George Pal produced from 1953. Of course, Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes, and all of the Godzilla films I'd seen and all the movies I saw on our local independent station on Channel 11. For whatever reason, and all the Irwin Allen movies, or Irwin Allen TV shows, movies too, but TV shows, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Land of the Giants, The Time Tunnel. I mean, all of it, for whatever reason, sparked my imagination. And it also led me to other things. It led me to reading. I joined the science fiction book club when I was 9 years old, 10 years in the 4th grade, 9 and 10 years old, and started reading the canon of classics, of science fiction classics. And Star Wars led me to my mom's Beethoven records, which she had never listened to in the whole time I'd been born. We had these records sitting down there, and one day I started going through them, and I realized, well, there's Beethoven records, and I knew Beethoven's Fifth. Dun 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 dun. I did not realize in how many science fiction movies Beethoven's Seventh Symphony was used. But fandom led me to other things. It made me interested in the world around me. I wanted to know what faster than light travel was. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Could it happen? I became interested in the world around us. I mean, I don't think you can be a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, flights of fancy, and not be interested in the greater world around you. I mean, that's what it instilled in me, a real curiosity. It also instilled in me the idea of boldly going in your own life. I'm never going to be able to go into space, but you can boldly go to, say, I don't know, France. Because what's in France? First of all, there's art. There's great cinema. I mean, I wandered, the first time I was in Paris, Mark Altman and I were guests of honor at the very first Star Trek convention in Paris, believe it or not. You could just wander around in Paris, and then you turn a corner in like a neighborhood, and there was a cinema showing Casablanca. Paris is truly everything they said it was. It was a magical place, and I loved every minute of being there. And it was incredible. So, and it instilled in me a love of people, a love of travel, all those things. But you know what it also instilled in me? A love of ritual. And what the reason I wanted when I was in college, my first year in college, I went to the Evergreen State College, which, by the way, is unrecognizable to me now. The student uprising in 2017, I'm like, that wasn't the college I went to, clearly. I mean, when I went to college, the whole point was to see what was out there, to boldly go. When I walked into college thinking, man, I knew nothing. Fill me up. I wanted to hear I wanted to discover, explore. The idea that I would want someone not to speak, the idea that I would would disagree with somebody, and I wanted to hear people I disagreed with. I wanted to hear all points of view. I wanted to hear all of it. There was no such thing as a safe space in college. I went to college because it was dangerous. It was dangerous to my perspective. It was dangerous to my points of view. That was the whole point, was to go to college and leave your fucking comfort zone and boldly go and find out what was out there, explore. What was in that book? What did that professor have to say? What did that guest speaker, was that guest speaker incendiary? Was there a firebrand filmmaker that was going to speak in class? Somebody that would piss everyone off? At Evergreen, the Evergreen I went to, I saw students jump on desks and scream at other students. Safe place. This college wasn't a safe place. It was a place where you go fuck yourself up. Whether you're going to drink beer for the first time, but it was a place to intellectually fuck yourself up, to twist yourself into pretzels, to think thoughts you'd never thought before, maybe that you never wanted to think before. It was a place where you tested your beliefs against other beliefs and against other people. That was the whole point. Academia today is unrecognizable to me now. I don't understand any of it. But when I was at Evergreen, you took what were called coordinated studies programs, where you'd have like three or four professors, and that was it. And for the entire, we had quarters. We didn't have semesters. So during the quarter, you would have a coordinated studies program and interact with these three professors. And my first coordinated studies program was called The Making of Meaning. And with The Making of Meaning, it was all about our lives are essentially, I mean, I know that they're essentially meaningless. And it's our job. Stanley Kubrick, I'm paraphrasing, said that the universe is an uncompromising, emotionless, cold place. And it is up to us as sentient beings that are here for the blink of an eye. Not even that, if you think about it in cosmic terms. We're not even, before the universe has even thought of us existing, we're already gone. So it's up to us to make our own meaning. And what our viewer here says, what Joseph is asking, is how does he explain his movie-going rituals to someone else? And I would say, look, man, we all give ourselves our own meaning. We create, I mean, most people, pick anything you like. Just off the top of your head, what is it that you like? Just pick anything that you like. Whether it's a game you play, whether everybody, in order to give our whatever it is we like to have it mean more, we imbue whatever we like with its own meaning. And when I love movie going, I love, like Joseph does, I love sitting in the center. I too love going to movies earlier than they start. I used to love going to the ArcLight and getting a drink, going to the bar when a big tentpole movie would open. Half the people there I knew. And you would hear the excitement. You would discuss what might happen, and you'd say hello to people. You'd have a drink in your hand, and you shared in that excitement because that made the evening better. It made it more meaningful. It wasn't just a movie that goes in one ear and out the other. I think one of the things that genre fans are grappling with is that never has there been a time in fandom where stuff meant less. When I was a kid, when I was growing up, in the olden times, everything meant something. Like, man, Stephen King had a new book coming out. I would anticipate it the day it came out. I'd ride the bus before I could drive. I'd go to, whether it was Island Books or B. Dalton Books or Crown Books, wherever the fuck I would go, and I would buy that Stephen King book, and you'd have to rifle through and figure out which one had the best dust jacket. It had to be pristine mint. That was ritualistic in itself. Pristine mint. I couldn't have any dents in the cover. And you'd take it home and you'd read it. I mean, it was a thing. It meant something. And I know no one else gave a shit. I cared. I mean, like, I had to know because for my own edification, I read Fangoria magazine. The first place I would turn in Fangoria magazine was Nightmare Library, and I'd read the descriptions and the reviews and figure out, ooh, I got to get this book, or ooh, I got to get, like, I remember reading a review of Jack Ketchum's Off Season. I'm like, fuck yeah, man, I got to read that shit. And and it would become a thing, and I'm like, when does it come out? I'd go to the bookstore, and I was reading like Graham Masterton's Revenge of the Manitou, and in the back of the book there were ads for other Graham Masterton books that I didn't have, like The Sphinx and The Djinn, and I'm like, well, shit, man, I got to get these. They're pinnacle books, and what if they're not published anymore? I mean, all of it I had my little rituals. Wednesdays I would take the bus in downtown Seattle before I could drive. I'd go to Bellevue, Kirkland, Wally's Comics. But before that, I'd go to Time Travelers and Golden Age Collectibles. And, it was a thing. Sometimes I'd go down with friends. Sometimes I'd go by myself. When Empire Strikes Back opened, saw it 26 times in the summer of 1980. But the thing is, I had to sit in the same seat every time. Front row, left side, 8th seat balcony, which is almost to the middle of the theater, just off center, but there was no things in front of me, and the screen, peripheral vision, it was the best place to sit. Had to sit there. Had to go early. Had to ride the bus down there. Friends would meet me. And that ritual gave it more meaning. It imbued meaning into the whole thing. It was important. That's why, because most people nowadays, no one gives a shit about anything. It's in one ear and out the other. And I understand there's so much content now. There's so much content. So much that it's hard for it to mean something. I mean, hell, I've watched entire 10-episode streaming shows that I was excited to watch, and I don't remember them. I know I watched all 10 episodes. I don't remember them. I can recite Star Trek episodes chapter and verse because I've watched them a million times. But nowadays, there's so much stuff. It's hard to ritualize movies. So, Joseph, I would tell people that it's like, most people, like, here's some wine. I'm having some wine. For those who want to know, it's the cheapest Coppola Pinot Noir. Having a little wine, double fisting tonight, and water. So, wine, perfect example. A lot of people just open wine and drink it. However, wine connoisseurs create a ritual around it. You smell the cork, you talk about it, whatever. It has a whole thing. You sip it, taste it on the back of your tongue. There's a whole ritual around it. And by doing that, you give it meaning. It's like, look, you can go through your life and live your life, and none of it matters. You have to make it matter. And these rituals that we create for ourselves helps us do that. And I'm right there with you, Joseph. When you go to the movies, make it a thing. Like, I do this. I treat movies and airports the same way. I like to get to the airport early. I like to people watch. I'm like the stealth traveler. I do all my check-in stuff early, unless I have to check a bag or something. I love the fact that you've got these kiosks. You roll up, drop your bag off. I'm a total stealth traveler because I like to get inside. I like to go to the gift shop. I like to look and see what paperback books they have, what magazines are out this week, what refreshments can I take with me, what nuts do you have, all of it, what coffee, what restaurants are in this terminal, and you want to see it all and look at it. And then if there's a bar, that's the best. Airport bars are the best because everybody's moving somewhere. You have great transitory conversations. You can meet people. It's like they're hit and run conversations. And in 15 or 20 minutes, you see how deep you can get with somebody that you're never going to see again. Men, women, young, old, doesn't matter. I'll have conversations with anybody. And so going to the airport, I love it all. I love getting there early. I love watching people. So some people, who cares? They go to the airport, doesn't matter. But if you make it matter, that's all the difference in the world. That makes everything more fun. Hell, I like driving to work in the morning. I've like, there's different off ramps that certain things happen at. It's a game. You play with yourself. Stories can be had. People to meet. Anyway. So, Joseph, what I would say to you is don't try and tell somebody how you go to the movies. Show them. take them on the adventure with you and explain why this means something. And you know what? You might turn somebody into a convert. You take him, you point out the excitement. You're like, look at these people, they're all excited. You go like last night or 2 nights ago when I went and saw Wakanda Forever. Oh my God, one of the most ethnically diverse audiences I saw. Everybody was excited. I sat next to a gaggle of black women, and it was fantastic because, oh my God, were they excited to be there. And their excitement was palpable. I was sitting next to some total geek who was trying to engage me. He didn't know who I was, but he was trying to engage me in his geekdom. And he kept commenting like, oh yeah, I read that. He was like parroting things that we reported on or whatever. So it was great. So I had a group of black women behind me that were very loquacious, not in a rude way, but they were responding to this movie and they were crying. And I had the nerd next to me and I had the boyfriend, girlfriend all cuddled up. The girl was crying. It was great. Fantastic. So what I would say is, don't try and convince anybody of anything. Just bring them with you and explain it as it's happening. Let people see it. And maybe some of that excitement that you have, your ritualistic behavior, which makes moviegoing into not just something to do, it's a whole event. It's a whole experience. You've created something out of nothing. Don't apologize for it. Keep doing it. God damn it. Keep doing it. Anyway, that's a great letter, Joseph, and I wanted to start out, and look, I don't even know what I was saying. I was just rolling. During this time, that said, Stub McShave says, I sent tips during Midnight Metal or Midnight Musings that didn't reach you in time. Well, here's the thing. I have all of the tips from Midnight Metal. I can see all the tips. Oh, unless we were off. So if you want to send a tip, oh, wait a minute. Stub McShave said, no, the only one I have is a prisoner documentary one from 6 days ago because they're saved. Tips are different than super chats. If you want to send a tip, the link is right down below. But I haven't seen any come through because they would still come through to Stream Elements, Stubble. Parth Trivedi, a new member. Parth Trivedi gifted 5 memberships to the Post-Geek Singularity. Parth, you're a good man, good person. Thank you very much. 5 memberships were gifted to the Post-Geek Singularity community. Thanks very much for that. So anyway, Bill Shatner, Deadline. Bill Shatner's on Deadline today. And first of all, for those of you who don't know, Bill Shatner, childhood idol. I also had the opportunity to co-write and then direct and edit a motion picture that he starred in. I got to direct Bill Shatner. I got to literally put words in his mouth. That movie was Free Enterprise, came out in 1999. It actually had its world premiere in October of 1998 in Sitges, Spain. Hopefully next year, to celebrate that, we'll be able to get it out on 4K. That's my goal. But William Shatner was in Deadline today, and let's look at what he said. This was published at 4:17 this afternoon by Bruce Herring. As they near the final frontier, there's apparently still some scores to settle between the castmates of the original Star Trek television and film franchises. Speaking to the Times of London for an interview that ran yesterday, William Shatner, who played Captain James T. Kirk on TV and in 7 films, gave a few jabs back at one of the people he worked with on those projects. At 91, yes, William Shatner is 91 years old. He went into space when he was 91. Shatner hasn't forgotten the criticism of his behavior when the cameras were not rolling. 60 years after some incident, they're still on that track. Don't you think that's a little weird? It's like a sickness, he said of the criticism. I began to understand that they were doing it for publicity. George Takei was simply the latest. The actor who played Sulu in the shows claimed Shatner's 2021 trip on Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin rocket was done to have a guinea pig to assess the impact of space on an unfit man. George Takei has never stopped blackening my name, Shatner said. These people are bitter and embittered. I have run out of patience with them. Why give credence to people consumed by envy and hate? Takei, who's very active on Twitter, has yet to respond. Here's the thing. Here's a little life philosophy. The way I've led my life is that every person is the king of their own hill. Every person you meet lives on a hill you don't live on. And when you go to that person's hill, you need to accept their terms. You can't expect, and this is true, I think, for the world. We live in a strange time today where everybody expects the world to be the way they want it to be. I didn't grow up that way. I grew up actually just the opposite. I grew up, when I went out into the world, to think that, well, the world's going to throw a lot of stuff at me, and I have to be ready for whatever the world throws at me. I would never have presumed to tell other people what they should think, say, or believe. I mean, if somebody wanted me to call them something or identify them as something, I had no problem with that. I'm a polite person, but it's something that I would hope they would realize, that don't ask me to do something that I don't believe in, and don't ask me to do something that, that you think I should do. If I decide I don't want to do something, that's my prerogative, and you shouldn't hold it against me. But I think that one of the things that people don't understand and have never understood about William Shatner, or as I call him, Bill, is, remember, when he was on Star Trek, he was the star of Star Trek. And Star Trek was never a ratings smash. It was going to get canceled after the second season. And after that, after a letter writing campaign famously started by B. Joe Trimble, they were able to save the show for another year. It lived to fight another year. And the thing is, imagine being the star of a show, a TV show, where all of that money, all of those people's jobs, your fellow castmates, all of them look to you, and if you're not good enough, if the show gets canceled, it's your fucking fault. No one sits there and says, well, this movie or this TV show, Star Trek's going to get canceled because I don't buy into that Japanese navigator or the guy sitting in the navigation console. I don't buy it. So we're going to cancel it. No, it's the star of the shows that are blamed. And rightly or wrongly, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley are Star Trek. Everyone else, great supporting cast. And George Takei was great as Sulu. And if you don't believe me, look at episodes like The Naked Time, or look at episodes like, Mirror Mirror, one of my favorite episodes. X06's recently released Sulu figure from Mirror Mirror is excellent. George Takei was a great actor. And yet, at the time that he was coming up, because he was Japanese, he never got the opportunity to be a leading man. Not the way William Shatner could be. So I can understand his resentment. And the thing about that is that when you're a leading man or a leading lady and you're the front person of a show, there's a lot of pressure on you that the rest of the cast doesn't ever feel. And what happened with Star Trek was kind of a crazy, interesting, it's never really happened before, not like what happened with Star Trek. So it's odd that I feel that I've always thought it was odd. Look, William Shatner is not the easiest person to work with. But the funny thing about it is, when I was directing him and when Mark Altman and I were going to work with him, we watched every performance that he gave comedically. He was on a variety show called Fridays, of course, Saturday Night Live, Airplane 2, everything that had happened. I think Miss Congeniality had come out before we made Free Enterprise, maybe that was after. But we watched anything that William Shatner did comedically. And frankly, I was not a fan of his comedy. He tended to go too broad, in my estimation, which made sense because he was a student at Stratford, and he came from a theatrical background. And when we made Free Enterprise, playing it larger than life, going broad, it wouldn't have worked. But what was interesting about working with Shatner was we included him in the creative process. We sat down and we said, look, once he agreed to be in the film, we sat down with him and we said, we want your notes. We want your input. And we went over every line of dialogue with him and discussed it. And he was an incredible collaborator. And I had a wonderful time working with him. And I said to him at one point, I said, look, I told him, I go, I'm not going to tell you how to act. Because I had heard the sabotage when a director was trying to tell him how to play Kirk. Every time I hear that, I'm like, oh, you poor boy. But the thing is, the way you work with someone like William Shatner is you go to him with respect. He's like the Godfather. And when we went to work with him, I said, listen, my big directorial note to you for this project is I need you to make the audience wonder at any moment in this movie, are you serious or are you just completely insane? And they have to wonder about it, and you have to play it deadpan. And he's like, I get that. And I didn't have to, once we had agreed the way he was going to play that character, sure, he was completely open to me making adjustments within the scene. But I had expressed to him what I expected him to bring me as far as the character was concerned. But then I had to let him do what he was going to do. I did not pay him for me to tell him how to act. I told him how the character should be and how to define the character. But it was up to him to interpret that. And I could adjust the interpretation if I didn't like it. But I would say 90% of the time, he gave me what I wanted. And the adjustments I made were only really to make the scenes better in terms of interaction and things like that. But he usually, Shatner wants to get everything done in one take because he's from TV and wants to get it done quickly. But the funny thing about Bill Shatner is when he's acting, he's feeling his way through it with take one, and he usually nails it on take two, which is fine. And that's not a problem. When you're making an independent movie, if you can get it 1, 2, or even 3 or 4 takes, you're doing pretty well. And it was great to work with him. But, I look at someone like William Shatner. He has lived life to the full. He's an equestrian. He's an entrepreneur. He's an author. He's a musician. He's a director. He's done so many different things. And to do that, you have to have a certain healthy ego. But it kind of bothers me to hear George Takei, when he made that comment about Shatner going up on Blue Origin and making that flight at 90. If you read what Shatner has written about that flight and how he came down and he was not, he didn't say, man, that was amazing, it was life-changing. He said it was life-changing, but he responded more. Here was a guy that people thought of as like the great. I thought of him as somebody who went out. He boldly went into the universe, even though he didn't. But William Shatner sort of boldly lived life. He's boldly living life today. To me, he's always been an inspiration. And I did work with him. And I did make a movie with him. Hell, I went to the Cannes Film Festival with him. The movie wasn't in competition. We were there selling it at the market. But I went to the Cannes Film Festival with William Shatner. I walked on the beach with him. No beach to walk on. He was delightful. And to watch how he's lived his life, especially the last 20 years. As we work with him in his late 60s. He's 91. It's incredible. And he went into space. And for George Takei, what 91 man is fit? Shatner certainly doesn't look like he looked like in the first season of Star Trek in 1966 and 67. But, at the end of the day, the only reason there is a Star Trek is because of William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley. And Star Trek is celebrating, it's 56 years old now. And George Takei is a part of it, part of the legacy. Again, XO6 just released. They released XO6, a premium 1/6 scale figure company, which I love, released a figure of Sulu in Mirror Mirror before they released a premium Exo-6 figure of Shatner. Think about that. I mean, we're getting Admiral Kirk from Star Trek Motion Picture next. Well, maybe next after Cisco. But, there's something to be said there. So anyway, I just feel that when you go through life, I mean, there's a lot of assholes out there, and I have no problem hating people. But hating people is taking energy away from you doing something yourself. If you dislike somebody, put them out of your mind. There's no reason to continue to foster hatred towards somebody. What does that do for you? Nothing. You're spending valuable energy wasting time on something that you shouldn't be. But anyway, I would say this. I think Shatner's right. At 91 years old, when he says the Star Trek cast is bitter and embittered, I would say that, without William Shatner, there wouldn't have been Star Trek the Motion Picture. And remember, George Takei was in Voyager, Star Trek Voyager. Shatner wasn't. George Takei was Captain Sulu, and Captain Sulu went on further than Shatner did in the in the official Star Trek franchise. So, why be angry about it? And why not concede the fact that Shatner's lived an extraordinary life? I aspire to lead the rest of my life the way Shatner's been leading his life now. So, anyway, you go, Bill. And here's to you, son. You know how much I love you. So, hey. God damn, I love Pinot Noir. Jaimin D sends it. By the way, just so y'all know, if you weren't suspecting already, this is a show where I'm bringing you ne'er-do-wells on. Get your cameras and get your mics ready. And if you please, just hold on. If you've been on the show before, hold off. Let's wait and let people who haven't come on the show, but we'll be bringing people on. So Jaimin D says, "Hey Rob, in my opinion, Best of the Best is a better movie than Bloodsport, but I'm still friends with people who disagree on that. But that's just me. Laugh out loud." Well, Jaimin, Best of the Best. You'll if any watchers of the John Campea show know, John Campea talks about Best of the Best a lot. So, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Elon Abadi is here. Elon Abadi sends a super chat in and says, "Future Fantastic Beasts films canceled, good riddance, or God forbid." Hey, look, man, you know what? Elon, if something doesn't perform, what are you going to do? You can't force proofs in the pudding. Remember, as much as I love my movies, they are products. They are consumer products that if consumers aren't going to buy them in the volume that they need to be bought in order to get renewed or to get more made, what can you do? And the last Fantastic Beasts movies, I like the Fantastic Beasts films, but let's face it, you know what everybody really wants? Everybody wants another Harry Potter movie. They want to see Hermione. They want to see Harry. They want to see the three of them come back and kick ass as adults. That's what everybody wants. And I'm sure that J.K. Rowling is writing more Harry Potter books, even though she's got more money than God, because that's what everybody wants. Russell Flynn became a member of the channel. Russell, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. Ooh, a silly goose writes in and says, "I started reading The Forge of God." Great so far. For those of you who don't know, there's a duology written by Greg Bear that I love. The first book is called The Forge of God, but the book, if someone gave me an unlimited, listen, man, if I had won that $2 billion, if I had won that money, there's about 10 things I would have gone and bought and just made them. And The Forge of God but the book I really want to make is book 2 in that duology, Anvil of Stars. And I want to do it as a streaming series. So, I have to check and make sure that I'm not supposed to be recording something right now. I hope I'm not. Let me make sure that Oh, good. I'm not. But anyway, The Forge of God. I'm glad you like it. For those of you who don't know, I kind of spoiled the shit out of it a couple weeks ago. But you know what? If you didn't see me spoil it, if you want to read a really fascinating, both of these books have different things. One follows the other. Anvil of Stars follows. Anvil of Stars has a fascinating premise, and it is so well done. And if you read the book, you'll see why I'd want to do it as a TV series. The whole book, the book would be, you wouldn't do it like, well, maybe you could do it in 10 episodes. I don't know. But I would do The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars as a 3-season series for Netflix. That's what I would do. All I know is that Mike Medavoy's Phoenix Pictures used to own the rights. There's so much money against it because so many people tried to write an Anvil of Stars script, but they always had to use the first 30 pages to tell the story of The Forge of God. Just fucking do it as a 30 episode, 3-year, 10 episode Netflix show. And really, pretty much I should be the one to direct it. I'll work with the writing team, but no one will let me do it because I made one movie 25 years ago, but that's neither here nor there. I'd do it better than anyone, just so you know. But yeah, I'm glad you're reading Forge of God. I can't wait for you to read it. Tom Jr. Jackson asks if I've read Stephen King's Fairy Tale yet. I have not. As a matter of fact, I've got my book stack. It's stacked up. You know what I was reading? Believe it or not, I was reading the book that goes to this that I showed, the house. I got sidetracked reading The House of Psychotic Women. Those are the movies that go with it, but the book is really good. And so I think Mark Miller's book is up next, but then I'm going to read Fairy Tale. Haven't read it yet. By the way, there are others in the world that know how much, how much I love Star Trek Picard Season 3. There are others now who are on that bandwagon, I think. But if you don't follow the guys at the Popcast, the guys at the Popcast have been doing something pretty funny. They've been doing all these speculation videos, and they've been looking up Terry Matalas, showrunner of Picard Season 3, Terry Matalas's everything that he tweets, and they're making videos about it, speculating about it. And they did a really fun, they sent me a shirt. Now, I don't even know, I could get in trouble, I guess, for showing this to you. But if you like this shirt, and you should, everybody, I want to start the campaign. Everybody should, as a matter of fact, we should go on Twitter and Instagram, ask them to sell you this shirt. I don't even know if they make this shirt in mass. They made one for me and sent it to me. Here's the shirt. Here's the shirt. It's a black T-shirt, Terry Trek, and you see Terry right next to the Y in Terry, and then the entire main cast of Star Trek Picard. There's a character in the bottom right corner that you don't know who that is yet, and there's a character in the top right-hand corner you don't know who that is either, and I'm not going to tell you. But this is the shirt that they've made. It's a black T-shirt, and there's Terry Matalas in the cast, and to promote Star Trek Picard Season 3, which isn't as far away as you might think, write the guys at the Popcast. They have a link. They have a T-shirt company or whatever. Tell them I sent you. Everybody should buy a Terry Trek T-shirt and wear them. And I want to start a campaign, hashtag Terry Trek, and take pictures of yourself, put them on Instagram, tag Star Trek. I would tag Star Trek on Paramount Plus, but they pre-blocked me, so I can't. But anyway, could be fun. One never knows. Football Frequency says, I pitched my Bigfoot movie I wrote to a manager of someone I want to cast. They're in. It opened new doors. I may be a writer-director soon. Crazy. Well, it's Football Frequency. It's not that crazy. You went out and did it. Look, the way to get a movie made, frankly, is if you have a cast member attached to it, if they like it enough, if you're able to do that. Most of the time you have to pay, but if you don't and you can get them attached and they dig it, hey, that's the way to do it, man. Good for you. You're not only a writer-director soon, you're producing. Don't sell yourself short, son. You are producing. So that's pretty good that you've done that. Michael Brammer sends in a tip and says, given the divisiveness of Captain Marvel in the MCU, How about the Marvels have a 900 number in the run-up to the movie? Vote for or against Rogue having a comic-accurate encounter with Carol Danvers. Idea stolen from Jason Todd's Death in the Family. Oh, I saw that. Well, I mean, for those of you who don't know, Rogue, when she was introduced in Avengers Annual 10, written by Chris Claremont and drawn by the great Michael Golden, one of my favorite comic books ever, Rogue shows up and steals Carol Danvers' powers, and she ends up falling into like the East River. I like that. And then the phone calls, what happened with when Jason Todd should, the Death in the Family, the Batman storyline, should Jason Todd live or die? let's call in. Of course, everyone called for him to get killed. We are bloodthirsty punch. I called to have him get killed. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty funny. Our friend Sonny Dominguez says, Wakanda Forever's hero's journey is why we love movies. A beautiful film about loss and moving on. King Hero is dead. The vultures come to pick the land. Shuri had to be Black Panther despite her fighting it. It was her ancestral legacy. It had to be her. Hey, man, I totally agree with that. As a matter of fact, there was somebody, a Facebook friend of mine who I really don't know. A Facebook friend of mine wrote, and I put it back on my page. I retweeted it because I thought it was great, and I'm gonna read this. So I didn't write this. This is from Nadia Robertson, who is a Facebook friend of mine, and this review of the film showed up on my feed, and I thought it was particularly apt. Wakanda Forever is a poignant reminder that sometimes heroes fight and die in unseen battles. Loved ones lost to quieter, less galactic threats like Thanos, a tangible enemy which could at least offer a revered death from glorious sacrifice in the name of honor. But this time, no superhero or science can be a salvation, and it's a delicate meta moment that must be addressed. The film's at its best when exploring the emotional complexities of loss and grief, basking in the immense talent of the cast, eye-catching visuals, and affecting score. Though not the soundtrack, though, for the most part, it's so on the nose that the lyrics may as well be, Black Panther is dead, gotta pick yourself up and be strong. Wakanda and especially you, Shuri. Making that melody up. At its least, the movie gets slogged down with superfluous scenes, disrupting the flow and sense of urgency as unnecessary side stories detract from the true substance of the script, an MCU usual offense. The strained attempts at alleviating an inherently sad situation seem to slow down the steam of the pacing, but consistent roars of laughter from the audience suggest crowd-pleasing humor is worth any detriment to many viewers. Naysayers will growl that the movie is absent its titular character, but those are probably the same folks mad about a female protagonist in Prey. Tenoch Huerta has instant star power as Namor, bringing to life the character with pathos, calculation, and charm. There's an interesting BVS-reminiscent emotional connection that helps steer misguided torment back into a place of reason and purpose. The emotional depth is the heart of the movie's themes and greatest strengths, including a touching Namor origin story with apocalypto feels. I'm just a sucker for some of the luscious underwater imagining, so personally, the Sea Kingdom scenes were delivered and had me thinking about the end of Splash, except also including warriors being flung like cannons on the tails of killer whales and humpbacks being rode like dune spice worms. Shout out to that Avatar second trailer, worth the wait to watch it for the first time in IMAX. Just all the awe. I like that. I agree. When I saw it in the theater, the audience absolutely loved it, and you can't take that away from them. We look at things differently than normal people do. I mean, call them the normies, call them the old school mundanes, whatever you want. I call them the general audience, the people that movies are made for. So if they're digging it, they're digging it. Don't take that away from them. So anyway, I want to read a few more letters. I got some more letters to read. So Joseph, I read Joseph's. Thank you, Joseph. let's see what I have here. Joe from Montreal writes, "Hey Rob, I walked out of Black Panther quite underwhelmed. I have no real issues with who becomes Black Panther. I thought that was the natural choice. I just thought it was dour. It seems its only purpose was to introduce new characters. Frankly, I had more fun in Black Adam, which I didn't really like either. At least it had some spunk to it. I understand that they were dealing with someone's passing, but I feel like they should have recast, with no disrespect to Chadwick Boseman. I brought my 11-year-old who sat there bored out of his mind for almost 3 hours. Why does this movie need to be as long as The Godfather? Where is the joy? Crossing my fingers for Ant-Man 3. I read that before, but, I think there's something to be said for that. I think that, this movie had a lot to deal with, and I thought that the direction they went in was intriguing, and I thought that this movie was, I really, really quite enjoyed it. I have to say, I really loved the movie. And I thought it was ambitious. I didn't think it was a great movie, though. I'll say that. But I did love it. I love what it did. I thought it was wildly ambitious, and I thought it swung for the fences. But it wasn't a great movie. This is an interesting letter. This comes from Eric Van Shore. Let's see. Dear Rob, I hope you're doing great and living the life. Well, I try. Do you miss practical action as much as I do? Sure, we have Gareth Evans' marvelous output. Looking forward to Havoc next year. That would be The Rad and The Rad 2 even radder. The John Wick flicks, too heavy on stunts and too light on emotional connection for my taste. But who else of the contemporary filmmakers combines exciting storytelling with breathtaking set pieces as grandiose as George Miller? In my opinion, Christopher McQuarrie takes the second place with his Mission Impossible movies. Christopher Nolan's work does not primarily focus on action, so I take him out of this. Matthew Vaughn brings a wild inventiveness to the table, which sadly goes overboard in The King's Man. Steven Spielberg did not return to Indiana Jones, so Ready Player One could be his last outing as an action director. Guy Ritchie seems to struggle in finding the right balance between character moments, style, and action beats. Tarantino did outstanding work with Kill Bill and Death Proof, but his latest work is not filled to the brim, but only peppered with spectacle. The Russo brothers did not do anything visceral since The Winter Soldier, leaning too much into impossible scenarios without an emotional hook into characters. Peril is not felt during most sequences shot in virtual studios. In that regard, Byung-Gil Jong's Carter and Romain Gravis' Athena are a breath of fresh air in the cinematic landscape of action extravaganzas. I haven't seen that. So I'm coming back to George Miller, who just wrapped production on his newest venture into the wasteland with Furiosa. It is this movie I cannot wait for. With Fury Road, he managed to bring me to tears, engage me fully, giving me goosebumps and leaving me with a deep sense of satisfaction, which I never felt before after watching an action film. Oh no, I didn't watch it, I experienced it. If he succeeds with half of that in Furiosa, we are looking at something special. But why is that? It might have been the wedding of impeccable sound design by Mark Mangini and the rousing score by Tom Holkenborg, driven by kinetic camera work by John Seals and fabulous editing by Margaret Sixel, that by the way is George Miller's wife. We get sucked into the story and our eyes are glued to the silver screen. It could have been the costumes by Jenny Bevan, who knocked it out of the park with an unparalleled richness, who, by the way, I interviewed for Designing Hollywood. The casting, crew, services, and marketing department all seemed to work together wonderfully. Every department clicked into the next. Miller's guidance propelled the actors forward, even when in doubt about the final product. In the end, it might be the decade-long pre-production phase, even if involuntarily for many years, which gave him opportunity to polish the script, props, and overall project to another level. So, am I missing the tactile nature and authenticity in my action movie diet? Well, you should critique other films through your own work, right? When we embarked on the journey to make our own Mad Max short film with Hope and Glory, we often thought about this, since we could neither wait for another handmade action film nor for Max Rokitansky's return. We might never witness Mad Max's return to the big screen after Furiosa hits theaters. She could be the new vessel carrying us into the wasteland. So we took this possibility seriously and made our very own Mad Max movie. Of course, our approach had to be more intimate, but we looked over at how George Miller did it. Not interested in recreating an already existing movie, we had to explore a never-before-seen side of his character and still put him in exciting action sequences full of real cars, real stunts, real explosions, and most importantly, real heart. All the sparks, gasoline, and sand are worthless otherwise. In building our own Interceptor and half a dozen other non-generic post-apocalyptic vehicles, my co-director Adrian made sure that everything is screen accurate. I really hope there's a link to this movie here. I took care of over 500 storyboards, and we approached the movie as George Miller did with Fury Road, as a film that could work without any line of dialogue. An extraordinary costume designer with more than just an eye for details and an ambitious DOP led to fantastic sequences. Taking care of everything we sorely miss in modern action cinema, we added full-fledged characters with intricate backstories, built emotional bridges to the audience, and made sure that there are real stakes during the story-driven action, and the recreation of the heightened stylized world Miller envisioned is impeccable. Doing this in Germany, of all places, we had to find ways around the desert. By setting large parts of the story in a cave system under the sunken city, we can promise that this movie will turn heads, figuratively and metaphorically. But why invest so much time and resources in this 40-minute short film of which you cannot make a dime? Well, because George Miller hit a nerve in us. He touched our souls with his work. We just want to give him back the feeling to look forward to a Mac Rockatansky adventure. We cannot make it in quite time for his birthday in March, but we wish to achieve 1% of what he did with his Mad Max movies. We want to carry on the torch of handmade action cinema, and surely are not alone in the filmmaking community. Even our poster will be painted, since movie poster art really is an endangered species. The whole crew and I would be honored if you would review our movie when it's out next year. Hell, not only that, I'll have you on the show. If you like your post-apocalyptic handmade action adventure rusty as fuck as we do, this might be your jam. Eric Von Shore, director of Hope and Glory. Do we walk the talk? Here's our teaser trailer. Judge for yourself. Well, I've not seen this yet. I just read this letter, so let's see if I can... Yep, there it is, folks. There is the teaser trailer for a handmade action Mad Max fan film co-directed by Eric Van Shore. You tell me. You tell me. By the way, Michael Brammer says, anyone interested in a remake of Damnation Alley? Hell yeah. Why not? I want to see a new Roadmaster. Jaimin D. First of all, let me respond to this letter. Eric Von Shore, I think the problem is this with modern action is that audiences want more and more and more and more and more. And unfortunately, we now have what we never had before, which is computer-generated effects. You can now do anything. So the thought in Hollywood is, unfortunately, why stage elaborate action that is dangerous? It's time-consuming, and we can do a lot more. I'm with you. I love what CG has allowed us to do. But I really miss, give me Kill Bill, like you pointed out. Give me Death Proof. Give me the Rad and the... Pardon me. So you know, when I'm saying the Rad 2, it's now become an ongoing joke, but I mean the Raid and the Raid 2 Barandal. I love realistic action. I love the Mad Max movies. I love Mad Max and Road Warrior, and I love Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and Fury Road's a masterpiece. But in this day and age... Unfortunately, we're just not getting that anymore. The spectacle is too much. And to be honest, you know, as much as I love the Fast and Furious franchise, I could barely even... I hated Fast 9. I'm like, this is terrible. I hated it. I couldn't believe how much. I really wanted to walk out of Fast 9. I hated it that much. And I love Fast 5. And I love Tokyo Drift. And I like the first... You know, I liked the movies until they just went off the rails. But, yeah, I mean, the great thing about action movies is we could tell that it was real. That was the whole point. I mean, the great thing about an action movie, especially a car chase movie, is we've all been in cars. So if somebody's driving really fast through city streets, we know what that's like, and it's exhilarating to see. I mean, I can't imagine. I did not see The French Connection in the theater, but that car chase when the camera's mounted on the front of the car and it's going underneath the elevated train, I'm like, that was insane. At that time, the audience must have gone bananas. Bullet, Steve McQueen in Bullet. Now it's a little tame, but back then it must have been ferocious. To Live and Die in L.A., that car chase, William Friedkin back on the streets again. Crazy. And I miss that. I really do. I miss that. But I just think that there's no appetite anymore because our audiences are so used to seeing the fantastical that the reality is not enough. So, kind of a bummer. Man, but I have to tell you, seeing The Road Warrior in the summer of '82, I think it opened at the end of May, because the summer of '82 between May and July, Conan, Road Warrior, Tron, Poltergeist, Star Trek II, Blade Runner, E.T., The Thing, even Megaforce. That was an incredible stretch. Those 6 weeks there, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'll never forget. Road Warrior played in Seattle all summer. I think I saw the movie like 6 times. That was some amazing shit. For those of you in the rest of the world, Road Warrior was called The Road Warrior here in America. Everywhere else, it was called Mad Max 2. The original Mad Max was much more than an exploitation movie. And believe it or not, even though they spoke English in Mad Max, in the original release, it was dubbed in America. You can now subsequently on video get the original language, you mean the original English? The original Australian audio track. But yeah, how crazy is that? I just think that right now audiences, the reality, look, we all of us old school action guys, we only fake action, CG action. There's nothing more annoying than CG action. Superhero action I can deal with, but car chases and stuff augmented by CG once the laws of physics are removed from an action sequence, I lose interest. That's basically my rule. If you're not following the laws of physics, your action sequence sucks. And no one really knows how to direct action sequences anymore. That's why the John Wick movies are directed by stuntmen now. They know what to do. But that was a great letter. I want to thank you, Eric, for writing in. Really enjoyed that letter, and it's sad. It's very sad. I'm bummed out. Now, this is an interesting letter. Seeing that we had Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans open. Let's see, I've got to find this letter. I had it, and where did it go? I have to find it, and now I don't know where it is. Hang on, here, hang on a second. I'm going to find it. I think it's here. Oh, never mind. I'm looking in the wrong place for this letter. I can't believe I'm looking in the wrong place, but now I know where it is. This is a letter about Steven Spielberg. And I'm going to read it. And it comes from our friend James Wallace, who's been on this show. And let's see. He said he sent it to me on Twitter. Or maybe he didn't. Well, James, if you're watching the show right now, send it to me again. I don't know, where is it? Where did it go? Anyway, I'll come back to you, James. I'm going to find another letter. Because I have a lot. So hang on a second. Bear with me. And then I'll bring some ne'er-do-wells on to be on the show. Because it's about that time. It's time. Our next letter comes to us from... This one comes from Willie J. Sasso. Willie says, "Hey, Rob, huge fan. I binged your 2020 breakdown of the Trevorrow Duel of Fate script a few weeks ago, and needless to say, you gave us a compelling performance." Well, thank you. I love hearing all of your musings on movies, Star Trek, Hot Toys, and the industry as a whole. I heard you mention from time to time that you're not a fan of Steven Spielberg's Hook. I was just curious as to why. Clearly, it's not a perfect movie, and film is subjective, but I respect your opinions and analysis on almost everything, so I was curious why you specifically weren't a fan of Hook. Growing up in the 90s, I loved Peter Pan and Robin Williams, so when I stumbled upon Hook at age 7, it was like discovering peanut butter and honey for the first time, a perfect match. I'm an ardent listener and a genuine fan. Thanks for all you do, and bangarang. Well, Willie, that is the difference between you and I. I saw Hook. I was substantially older. I found Hook to be, hey, on paper it should have been great. But I found the movie cloying, and I really didn't like the whole depiction of Never Neverland. The set was beautiful. I was actually on the set of Hook. The ship set, it was insane. It was on the Columbia lot. It was gigantic. It was amazing. But I didn't buy into any of it. I thought it was a movie that desperately needed a large dollop of reality. And it had no verisimilitude for me. And I thought it was cloying, and I just really did not like almost everything about it. I didn't like the way anything was presented. I didn't buy the characters, the way they were shown, the development, nothing. And I know people are like, oh my God, because I know people love Hook, but I really didn't like Hook, and I feel bad about it. I feel bad because everyone loves Hook. Now, on the flip side of that, Ernest Rister writes in and says, it's about Empire of the Sun. Dear Mr. Burnett, I've noted your enthusiasm for Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun several times on the John Campea Show and your own stellar productions on the Post-Geek Singularity channels. I share your point of view, and I was wondering if you had read the review of the Empire of the Sun on Blu-ray.com. If not, I hope you have time to give it a read. I've taught film analysis and media design in San Antonio, and I use Empire of the Sun as an analysis model to introduce the concepts of film analysis to high school students. The Blu-ray.com review reprints a review I wrote around 1999, which is essentially my lecture, only without the very fun clips and screenshots, and I would be very curious as to your own thoughts on the film and the essay. Again, I know you're busy. I try to share the great affection I have for this film from time to time, and I think you would enjoy the essay. Who knows? Maybe you can cajole John into giving it a look as well. And maybe, just maybe, he might see Empire in a new light. The Blu-ray.com reprint can be found here as the official site review of the Blu-ray disc. Well, Ernest Rister, and he is at, if you want to write him, he's at buckyrister@yahoo.com. I'm going to read your review because I'm curious, because I love Empire of the Sun. And now here is, this is from, although it's reviewed by Kenneth Brown. This is really long. Actually, I can't, heck it, it's not that long. Fuck it. I'll read it. I want to know what you said. Maybe the name on your thing isn't a pseudonym. But I'm going to read this anyway, because I love Empire of the Sun. So this is by Kenneth Brown. It was written November 17th, 2012. Oh, man, there's so many ads now. Come on, don't do that. Why do they do that? Why do they always do that? I can't. They have put a ad. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a review of Empire of the Sun, the Steven Spielberg movie. It isn't often that I step aside and give the floor to one of our readers. Oh, okay, here we go. It's not that I believe our membership's opinions are somehow inferior to mine. Far from it. One of my favorite pastimes is scouring the forum and perusing user reviews for analysis and discussions about films I've either adored or perhaps too callously dismissed. Every once in a while, though, I come across a user review or in-depth forum analysis that so changes the way I view, understand, and appreciate a film that I want nothing more than to showcase it. Enter our own Ernest Rister's Empire of the Sun, Spielberg's overlooked, misunderstood masterwork. Originally published in 1999, Rister's article is a fascinating, dare I say, essential read, and a must for anyone who's intimately or even casually familiar with director Steven Spielberg's supplemental portions of my Blu-ray review, as Rister's film analysis is loaded with spoilers. Otherwise, the floor is his. Well, it's not often we get a new Steven Spielberg movie. His movie, of course, The Fabelmans, open in limited release this weekend. I can't wait to see it. I think I'm going to go see it tomorrow. So here is once Blu-ray.com's Ernest Rister, now the Post-Geek Singularity and Robservations' own Ernest Rister. 10 years later, here's his review presented only the way I can read it. Here we go, Ernest. Take it away. And this is his essay about Empire of the Sun. In the short documentary, The China Odyssey, Steven Spielberg talks about his take on author J.G. Ballard's semi-autobiographical novel, Empire of the Sun. Ballard's book details the author's own true-life experiences as a British child of privilege separated from his parents by the Japanese invasion of Shanghai in 1941. And one of Spielberg's boldest opinions of the work was that half the book was a lie. Half of it true in the broad strokes, certainly, but it was Spielberg's belief that the details and vignettes were completely warped by Ballard's childhood perception. This is crucial to understanding Spielberg's work on the film, which has long been dismissed or completely fundamentally misread. Not a single shot can be trusted. Jamie says, I was dreaming about God. This is Christian Bale's character. Mary, what did he say? Jamie, nothing. He was playing tennis. Perhaps that's where God is all the time, in our dreams, and that's why you can't see him when you're awake. Do you think? Mary, I don't know. I don't know about God. Jamie, perhaps he's our dream and we're his. Consider the scene referenced in italics above. Spielberg concludes this passage with a shot of Jamie in bed while his mother and father look on fondly. Spielberg's editor, Michael Kahn, then does something strange. He performs a quick dissolve of this same shot into itself, which at first glance appears to be a gaffe. It isn't a gaffe, it's intentional. Spielberg wants you to remember this shot for an important reason. Only later, and only if you remember that odd dissolve, do you see the payoff. Jamie becomes separated from his parents and spends the remainder of his childhood in a Japanese internment camp. He spent years idealizing his parents to the point where he finally admits, in a scene of tremendous power, he can't remember what they look like anymore. Subtly illustrating this point, hanging next to Jim's makeshift prison bed, is a Norman Rockwell painting torn out of the pages of Life magazine. The painting is of a mother and father looking fondly at a child in bed. It is the exact same image from earlier in the film. The implication here is that the earlier scene never happened, or at least didn't happen in the way Spielberg presented it to you. The reality of the moment has been skewed by Jamie's fading memories. Either way, Spielberg's camera lied to you, and in 1987 it seemed like there wasn't a film critic in America who noticed. Spielberg's camera is a font of dishonesty in Empire of the Sun, a blazingly original, criminally ignored film. Nothing in the frame can be trusted. Consider the first appearance of John Malkovich as the stranded maritime con man, Basie. When we first meet Basie, he is one cool customer, strongly backlit, his face obscured by dark sunglasses and a GI cap. This is all fine and good, except Basie's appearance has already been foretold by the cover of the Wings comic book Jamie reads in the first moments of the film. The cover of the comic details a backlit GI wearing dark sunglasses and a wide-brimmed cap. When the camera sees Basie, we see him as Jamie remembers him. We see him as Basie as Jamie remembers him, and Spielberg even cuts to the comic book to call your attention to the association. In the closing moments of the film, Jim confronts Basie and finds him a thin shell of a man with bad skin, still perusing his dream of being the pirate lord of Yangtze. Is his physical condition simply the result of malnutrition? Unlikely, since at this moment Basie is seemingly... This is really annoying because an ad keeps jumping this... This is the jumping this article. I hate all these pop-up ads. I hate them. His physical condition simply result of malnutrition? Unlikely, since at this moment Basie is seemingly ample supply of Hershey's chocolate bars. No, this is the real Basie, not the idealized Basie, but the real Basie. Jim's days of hero worshipping are over. The truth is that Steven Spielberg made a film that toyed with reality as much as Rashomon. But because in 1987 he was critically regarded as a sort of live-action Walt Disney, a commercial filmmaker who distilled complexity down into family-friendly mass-market product, Spielberg's work in Empire was taken at face value, and the film was dismissed as a pointless failure. I wouldn't quite say that. I love Empire of the Sun, but I did think it was over-directed when I first saw it. But this analysis... bangarang indeed. Empire of the Sun would seem to be setting up and begging for analysis, and as it is so loaded with moments of fantasy and reverie in the midst of suffering. The film is all about the human need for escapism and denial in the face of a harsh reality, but it was received as a Shanghai version of an American Tale by way of a David Lean imitator suffering from Peter Pan syndrome. This was incorrect. Wildly incorrect. Many critics, in fact, directly faulted Spielberg for the unreality of Empire of the Sun, and they took him to task for it. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert were particularly harsh. They missed the point. Spielberg literally lifts the subconscious interpretation of events by a 12-year-old boy and prints those memories onto film. The prison camp, which was criticized for being a fantasy construct and not a real environment, exists as the child remembers it. Since children can have quite a fine time with a cardboard box, you can imagine how much fun a boy who loved planes had living next to an airfield. Spielberg puts that interpretation on film. It is sad that there are two types of media, lean-forward media and lean-back media. Lean-forward media asks you to participate, to do your own work, to sort things out. Lean-back media does all the work for you. The film acts upon you as opposed to you injecting yourself into the film. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a lean-back movie. E.T. is a lean-back movie. Jaws is a lean-back movie. And even The Color Purple is a lean-back movie. I would also say that Wakanda Forever is a lean-forward movie. It asks you to participate and do your own work, but that's just an aside. Empire of the Sun is a lean-forward film, but because Spielberg created so many masterful films in the classic Alfred Hitchcock, Frank Capra, John Ford, and Walt Disney mold, this is what people expected from him. Empire of the Sun was something completely new from Steven Spielberg, a film that worked on multiple levels of reality, with one informing the other. Audiences and critics did not know what to make of it. Spielberg became a victim of his own success. Having proven himself a master of fantasy and special effects, audiences and critics took his visuals, some of them subtle, some of them wildly abstracted, at face value. The film is jammed full of impossible moments that clearly are not happening, including a toy glider that stays impossibly aloft, the aforementioned scene involving the family, a trio of pilots who salute the young boy in a hall of welding sparks, a pilot of an F-15 who waves to Jim, a refrigerator that bursts open revealing instead of food, glitter and toys. There's a gesture that Jim sees his father perform, rubbing his finger across his upper lip. Later, Jim will have a new father figure, Dr. Rollins, who will repeat the same gesture. Film critic Patrick Taggart actually asked what point of this gesture was. What was the point of this gesture? Years later, I'm happy to tell him that this gesture is the result of Jim's fading recollections of his parents. He remembers his father making the gesture, and as Dr. Rollins becomes his new father, Jim begins superimposing attributes onto him, including his father's own mannerisms. It could actually be the reverse, with the earlier shots of the father actually warped by the later memories of the prison camp. Again, nothing can be trusted. Spielberg reveals this inner life to us in an enormously subtle way. The standard practices for interior point of view scenes is to clue the audience in by use of hazy wipes and dissolves or cross-cutting between interior POV and actual POV. Spielberg discarded these devices completely, trusting in the intelligence of his audience. He does use slow motion and the occasional absurd image to try and drive his message home, but in Empire of the Sun, he is more apt to lead you to the truth from the edges. One quick throwaway spotlights the British POWs reading from A Midsummer Night's Dream as Jim races by, little clue to the movie's intentions that Spielberg slips by you almost subliminally. The film is about escapism and how it can kill. Time and again, Spielberg and his screenwriter Tom Stoppard serve up an entire cast of characters who choose to ignore the reality of the world around them and end up emaciated shells of their former selves or worse. The film's message seems to be that the face of such serious reality, denial and escapism are deadly, and the world must be dealt with on its own terms. Jim's great dream, other than flying, is to reunite with his parents, and he carries all of his childhood memorabilia in a small suitcase. Jim must forsake this fantasy and grapple with reality. The suitcase that contains his dreams will later be seen in a closing coda that mirrors the opening shot of the movie, the dead floating in the Shanghai harbor. Because of his preoccupation with exploring this theme, Empire of the Sun is unique in the Spielberg canon in that it is a film less concerned with plot than it is with examining an idea, the value and necessity for denial and escapism, and all the ways the human animal lies to itself. The unfortunate result is a film that winds down emotionally by the end of its second hour and has been called somewhat distant. Movies are things that we go to for many reasons, but as Roger Ebert says, we primarily go because we want to feel something. Works like Empire of the Sun border on functioning like a parlor game. They're a great workout for the left side of your soul and a litmus test for how you view film, but they're also a bit emotionally cold. This often repeated criticism of Empire of the Sun, that it fails to engage its latter scenes, isn't something so easily dismissed away. Lawrence of Arabia sported a hole in the center of its drama in the shape of a man who was a total enigma. Empire of the Sun, which David Lean himself was attached to at one point, also has a protagonist at its center who's emotionally distant, keeping the viewer at arm's reach. The difference is that in Lawrence, you had a man of fathomless interest and contradictions at its fore, and in Empire of the Sun, you had a spoiled child. To me, Empire of the Sun represents the death of the Spielberg I grew up with, just as much as it tells the tale of a child who must shuck off the best parts of childhood in order to survive. It is my personal belief that the failure of this film was a giant blow to the man, whose career went into a brief artistic tailspin even as it was generating ever higher box office returns. Looking back, I can't help but sense that Spielberg tried to grow as an artist and was rejected and dismissed, and so, returning to his bread and butter, felt bored and disinterested. Spielberg's public quotes around this time are the most self-loathing of his life, referring to works like Hook as hamburgers and himself as little more than a McDonald's fry chef. Spielberg would be reborn in 1993 with Schindler's List and has since proven beyond little doubt that he is at the top of his game when he tackles new and challenging material. Empire is a film from the new and challenging category, and the great thing about home video is films can have a second chance, and it is never too late to rediscover a buried classic. Empire of the Sun deserves your attention, but what's more, I think Spielberg's work in the film deserves your open mind and your further contemplation. Wow, dude. Okay, let me just say, is anybody still listening to this show? I know that was long, but oh my God, I fucking love Empire of the Sun. And you know what? I've always kind of thought what you were saying was true, but I never drew the conclusions you drew. I totally agree with you. You are 100% right about this. What an amazing analysis of this film. Rister, you're the fucking man, dude. Thanks for sending this in. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you. Wow, what a great review. That makes me, would it surprise you to know that I have that media book? I have Empire of the Sun, and I can watch it. By the way, where's the 4K? I'd love to get that in 4K. But, you know, it's funny. I thought Empire of the Sun was over-directed when I first saw it. The scene with the airplane flying, specifically at the beginning of the film, in his backyard, what you just said, you nailed it, bro. That is an amazing bit of film analysis, and I totally agree with you. 100%. Wow. Yeah, that's what an amazing video. Really, really, really love that. Parth Trivedi sends in a tip and says, I just wanted to give you a shout out on the level of vocabulary that you use. It is a rarity these days, and as someone who is forced to use common words in day-to-day conversations, I truly regard your choice of words. Well, that's very nice for you to say. You, sir, elevate conversations. Well, I read a lot. I mean, I don't, to be honest, I wish I had better vocabulary. And sometimes I make malapropisms because of Mrs. Malaprop. But I do that. But that's very nice of you to say, Parth. Thank you very much. Mr. Tickle Trunk, he is a member of the channel and says he hasn't done this in a while and sends in a heart. Well, Mr. Tickle Trunk, right back at you, buddy. Carmel says, super chats and says, hello, Rob. I was curious if you watched any of our boy Az's video on the late, great Kevin Conroy. I have not. I'm surprised it hasn't gone viral. It's a very touching tribute, and I was hoping you'd share your thoughts. I have not seen that yet, but I will. I obviously am great friends with Az, and I would love to watch that. That's great. It's good to hear. That's really cool. Jaimin D sends in a super chat and says, here's my one recommendation for the night. Pandora and the Flying Dutchman, with the ever charismatic James Mason and the beautiful Ava Gardner, with both of their most haunting performances. I've never seen that. I would love to see that. That would be really good to see. I would quite enjoy that. Which I think that's amazing. And this, I'm still blown away by this review. Ernest, you've made me take my first step into a larger world, and I very much appreciate that. And goddamn, do I love Empire of the Sun. This is interesting. So I've been banging on about how I'm bothered by the cosmology of the Marvel Cinematic Universe regarding Phase 4. All the gods that are introduced, everybody that's been introduced, gods fighting in Egypt, the Celestials, Arishem the Judge, a Celestial coming out of Earth, and no one seems to pay any attention. And it really bums me out. I was really hoping the Talican would maybe have sent out advanced troops to see what cracked open the ocean floor. I mean, come on, but we didn't get that. What can I say? So this letter comes to us from Dominic. Just Dominic. And the subject is Feige's simplification of the MCU cosmology. Hey, Rob, I was hoping to send this in as a hotline question of the day on the John Campea Show, but my mind often runs faster than I can talk. You and me both, pal. You bring up the cosmology of the MCU and how we're getting Celestials, Eternals, Greek gods, etc. I've been wondering the same thing. It seems like every new MCU project is introducing a god-type figure of some kind. Zeus and Hercules, Eternity and Thor, everyone in Moon Knight, Namor, referred to as the Serpent God, Feather Serpent God in Black Panther, Kang, now in Ant-Man. And meanwhile, no one is talking about the Celestial sticking out of the earth. Well, it wasn't until a conversation you had with John about the Fantastic Four that I started to put two and two together, kind of. In your conversation, you mentioned how Galactus would be the end game for the Fantastic Four. There really is nowhere else you can do with them, so you'd have to build up to Silver Surfer rather than introducing him right away, which makes sense. However, with Feige's often simplification of the MCU to make things make a little more sense and fit the world he's created, like your idea of assuming he'd just have Wanda already say, no more mutants, which seems like a Feige thing to do, and the Fantastic Four hidden away in the quantum realm, both haven't been confirmed as of yet, but we could all see it happening. What if there is no Galactus? I mean, we have Arishem right there. Sure, they're not entirely the same, but could that be the next endgame? Switching out one immeasurably large god, like a figure capable of destroying planets, with another? Thanks for all you do. Love your deep dives and Trek rants. Dominic. Well, that's interesting, Dominic. I think that, maybe the idea of Authorship coming back and judging humanity. I mean, that's essentially what Authorship's going to do. It's very Galactus-like. I could definitely see that. Sure. Thing is, though, Galactus is a marquee character, and people want to see that. I mean, now that it's funny because now you're saying it, I'm like, once we've seen Authorship, do we need to see Galactus? Depends how Galactus is dealt with, really. So that's actually very that's an interesting. It's interesting. I don't know about that. Yeah, because it's interesting. All that celestial crap came after. I think it came after Galactus, too. I mean, it's not crap, but I'm not really sure. I think it did though, because Galactus was like, and now like early Fantastic Four 14 or something. I don't quite remember, but it's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. I like that. Let's see. Sam Sughart says, I have The Question and the George Perez Wonder Woman omnibuses. Oh my God. Any others you could recommend? Well, I literally have hundreds in here. It really depends, what you like. I mean, I'll tell you, since you like the Question's 80s, if you haven't read the George Perez Marv Wolfman run of New Teen Titans, I think there's now 5 omnibuses. Get those comics. They were my favorite team books. They're early 80s. They're overwritten, but I love them. And they're really, really good. And the Judas Contract, if you don't know what the Judas Contract is, you don't look it up. It's really good. It's really good. So yeah, that's what I would. But there's so many. I mean, there's so many great omnibuses. It depends. Like I have a lot of DC omnibuses. I mean, have you read? Like I'm looking at the Swamp Thing omnibuses right now. Sandman, the absolute versions of Sandman. I mean, these are just amazing books to own. I mean, these are some of the most beautifully produced. I mean, this is some quality stuff. It just depends what you like. But there's so many. I mean, I've got it. I don't know what the last omnibus I just got the Alan Moore Miracle Man omnibus of all his work on Miracle Man that Marvel's republishing, but they can't use his name, which is so bizarre. But it's just like written by the author. That's what it says. Written by the author. So weird. Thomas Logan says, Marvel Studios register the names Avengers Eternity Wars and Celestials End of Time. Can you see them finally diving into this cosmology and the impact of Authorship and Tiamat being revealed, or Tiamat revealed to the human race? I don't know. I don't know if they look. I still think that they should do, some kind of that. We saw in WandaVision some kind of X-Files show where you have our human characters just traveling the Earth, dealing with the ramifications of all this stuff. I don't know. I don't know. It's all very interesting, all of it, and they could do a lot of different kinds of things, but it's hard to say. They keep introducing these giant concepts and not doing anything with them, which kind of bothers me. All right, everyone, the time has come. I'm going to see what you have. I'm going to send the link out. If you've been on the show before, hold back. I want to see if we get somebody new. If we don't, we don't. But there it is. It's in the live stream. Please have your camera and mic ready. And by the way, use Google Chrome if you can. I'm not necessarily endorsing Google Chrome, but it's more stable, certainly, than Safari or other things. So let's see who might show up to come on this show. And remember, you can still, whoever's on the show, we're going to be answering tips and super chats as well, because That's always fun to see what happens. And, if you want to ask our viewers questions, you can do that. Well, let's see if anybody comes in. I'll read another one. This one comes to us from Jeff Dyer. Jeff Dyer says, my sister's calling me. I wonder why my sister's calling me. She's never called me before ever. I'm gonna answer the phone right now. Hey, Susie.
Okay, hold on for a quick second.
I'm broadcasting live on YouTube.
Wait, is that what?
I'm broadcasting live on YouTube right now.
I can't hear you.
Oh, well,
Sorry, I call you and I can't even fucking hear you. Okay, what?
I'm broadcasting live on YouTube, doing my show live, and there's people all over the world watching me right now, and you've called me, and I picked up the phone.
Well, I'm not going to talk to you right now because I was going to ask you. Well, I'm going to let you go.
Okay, but you can call me tomorrow.
All right. Broadcast. Okay.
All right, Suze. I'll see you later.
Right.
Bye.
All right, bye.
That was, boy, everyone's calling me right now. Like, and Elizabeth's sending me pictures of the dogs. Anyway, Jeff Dyer writes, sorry for that interlude. You never know what you're going to get on Saturday night here on Robservations, the show about something. Jeff Dyer, it's funny because somebody says I make them nervous with the way I drink. I'm trying to get wine all over my lips. That's why I drink that way. Hi, Rob. Jeff Dyer says, I hear Indiana Jones may be coming to Disney Plus as a streaming show. Not shocking that the House of Mouse would want to exploit this IP, and after all the talk about Chris Pratt taking over the role and trying to imagine how future indie films might look, the minute I heard about the possible weekly indie TV show, it seemed very fitting. I'm not a fan of the young indie show, but instead I'm imagining what today's technology and the right creative team could do with this. To be specific, I remember how George Lucas and Steven Spielberg patterned Raiders after the old 1940s movie serials. Think about it. A weekly streaming show with great adventure and exciting cliffhangers could be a modern-day movie serial. Each episode could start with a quick recap in the style of movie serials and end with Indy or other characters in a life-or-death situation. As for the MacGuffins, I heard you say on Campia that there are only so many artifacts for Indy to track down, and that's true. But what if each season was a quest to find an object? If the show runs 4 to 5 seasons, that would be a lot of historical or religious artifacts to locate. To conclude, while it's hard to fathom Indy continuing without the legendary Harrison Ford, but right now I'm just allowing myself to ponder what might be. As Spock once says, there are always possibilities. Thanks, and eager to hear your opinion, good sir. Your humble fan, Jeff Dyer. P.S. Your Superman Returns documentary is a favorite of mine, and I've watched that probably more than the movie itself. Well, thanks, Jeff. For those of you who don't know, I did make a 3-hour documentary on the making of Superman Returns called Requiem for Krypton. Making Superman Returns. Captain Robert April says, I just want him to fix She-Hulk. Oh, man, what a disappointment that turned out to be. Sonny Dominguez says, any movies you had to explain to friends who missed symbolism in scenes? I love sit-forward movies. Friends say I look too deep into the movies. No, you don't. Nobody looks too deep into the movies. I think it's great that you do that, Sonny. Never stop. Let's see who we got. We got some people here. First we got Binary Sunset Media is here, and we have our friend Stubble McShave. Well, let's give me a moment, kiddos. I'm gonna throw you into the show, both of you. Can you both hear me? Stubble, you can hear me. Binary Sunset Media, can you hear me? Oh, good. I can hear it. Great. Okay, then. I can hear both of you. Give me a minute, and I'm putting you in the show, Coach. Hold on. I'm the coach. I'm putting you in. You're the team members. That's actually how it should be working, I suppose. And let me do that. Give me a minute. It's hard to do this live, but I'll manage. Let me just bring you guys down and put you in. All right, Stubble. Yeah, it's Sunday morning for you. So it's 7:45 in the morning. What the hell are you up for? Jesus, why not? Why aren't you sleeping in, sir? I don't know. Oh well, there you go. All right, please welcome. We have here we go. We have on the right, Binary Sunset Media, and in the center we have our old friend Stubble McShave, the biggest Wheel of Time fan there is on planet Earth. Gentlemen, how are you this evening?
Good.
I ask you, Binary Sunset, where are you coming to us from tonight?
Regina,
Saskatoon.
Saskatchewan. Yeah. Saskatchewan, Regina. Sorry, I'm from Saskatoon. I'm actually in Regina because I just got a job as an assistant editor, and they got me an apartment, and I'm kind of alone, and so I'm like right away Saskatoon. But yeah, I'm in Regina.
Congratulations. What are you working
thanks,
on?
man. Well, you're an inspiration for that. TV show.
Okay.
So it's like it's like my first big jump. Like I've been working freelance for a number of years, and this was the first kind of opportunity. You're paying the dues. A number of years.
Paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir. The check is in the mail. Yeah. That's some big.
And they finally vouched. They said, "Let's get this guy in there." So, yeah.
Congratulations, man. I mean, stick with it.
Thank you.
And you will succeed. Now, Stubble, I know. You tell the folks at home who are watching right now that might not know you, where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming from southeast of Sweden, in a small town over here, and and I gave people like 2 minutes before I jumped on.
That's good.
So I didn't. Yeah,
that's good. It's always good to see you. All right. Yeah. Well, I will ask you, Stubble. What's going on? What would you like to talk about?
I sent you a tip.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It didn't show up.
No, but I can break the subject here.
Now, bring it up.
And it's So, nerd and geek, the terms. People think that they are the same, right?
Yeah, but I guess they're not. Geek is more derogatory because of its past association to like sideshows and things like that.
For me, it's a clear difference. Geek is something that you're excited about, something that's coming. Nerd is when you're excited about delving deep into a subject.
All right, you know what? I could buy that. I mean, I could see that.
If you use it in a verb, if you geek out about something,
right,
then you're excited about something.
Okay.
If you nerd out about something, then you're going into the details.
You know what? I like that. I mean, look, one day the term geek is going to get us all canceled because someone's going to be like, well, it really meant the sideshow freaks back when they were victimized as part of the... Whatever. I get it. I understand. Geeks were horribly mistreated.
I will give you an example. When you were young, you got the Star Trek technical manual in the mail or in the store or whatever.
Yeah. It's a good example.
And when you got it, you were excited. You were geeking out. But when you read it, you were nerding out.
Yes. And why do you have to... What makes you think that I don't still have it? Right over there, and why do I have to be a child? It's horrifying. It's horrifying how much of this stuff I still read. But no, you know what? That's I like that. I like that definition of geek and nerd. I think it's good. That's and it makes sense. I thought your explanation is quite. Because
you weren't. Maybe we were, but not to the same. You weren't geeking out when you were reading it. You were nerding.
You're now getting to geek out on Jodorowsky. Yeah. so I saw that. That was quick, but I saw it. But yeah, I like that. You're geeked out.
Geek is excitement.
Yeah,
nerd is delving.
Yeah, I like that. So wait a minute. So when Brandon Sanderson had his had his Kickstarter, you geeked out about the fact that he had 4 new books. But when you read them all, then you're nerding out over him.
When I'm going into the details, I'm nerding out.
Yeah, all right.
I'm not geeking out. Yeah.
I geeked out along with Az when a company made Prisoner action figures. And when I finally get them, I'm going to nerd out. And they're going to ship them. So I got things. I'm pretty excited because I am getting those. They say they're going to ship those figures soon. And also the 1/6 scale 66 Batmobile from Jazz Inc. that I paid for like 3 years ago is going to come to me as well. So I'm nerd. No, I'm not. I'm geeking out about both of those things. You can't really nerd out when you get an action figure thing.
You nerd out when you're checking all the details on it and
yeah.
This
This isn't totally accurate when I'm looking at all the schematics online and I'm like, is this thing in actual,
Yeah, but that's my definition. But I think it's pretty accurate.
I like that. I think that's good. Speaking of that, Brian O'Neill Singleton. This is a good. People ask this question a lot, actually. I want new screen adaptations of The Shadow, The Phantom, Doc Savage, The Spider, and even The Question. What are your thoughts? Well, let me ask you guys this. I'll throw this out to you first. Let me ask Binary Sunset Media this question. So these characters, The Shadow, The Phantom, Doc Savage, The Spider, and The Question, are old pulp characters. And they originated, I mean, we've seen it, a lot of them have had movies. The Shadow, The Phantom, Doc Savage with Ron Ely. I don't know if there's probably been a Spider movie. And The Question's the DC comic character. I think it's a Charlton character originally. So that's not really an old pulp character, but it's still an older comic character. But the question, let's just talk about the 30s and 40s pulp characters. Do they still have a place with today's moviegoers?
I'd say it's tough because we're definitely getting into that distance away from where people actually can recognize them. Because in the 90s, like Rob, they had the Phantom, they had the Shadow, and they didn't really even take hold. And actually, when we look back on those films, they're actually pretty good. I actually think the Phantom, the Phantom's actually pretty solid. The Shadow is actually shockingly pretty solid.
Yeah, really good.
We watched it a little while ago, and it's pretty good. And I don't think, unless they just took the name and totally revamped them, I don't think that it would resonate that well, because you've talked about this a lot on the show before. When you have something like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, they're starting to get the distance away from, when people went to Star Wars or the Raiders, there was an audience that was nostalgic. They were like, wow, I grew up with this. Right. So this is done in a really big way. So now with the 40s characters, there is probably a good possibility with good writer where they can craft something that could be very compelling, because the Watchmen was originally supposed to be the Charleston characters. Yeah. So you could actually craft something, but in reality, that was better because then something original came out of it. But I think it's tough. It depends on what your aim is. If you want to reintroduce these characters, because the Phantom, I believe, as a character, has a built-in ability it passes the mantle down, right?
Right, sure.
So you could reintroduce that character. It's tough though. If I had, and this is going back to the geek element, I would, and this sounds stupid probably, I would actually rather somebody.
Nothing can sound stupid on this show.
Nobody would want this, but I would like them to take the original Orson Welles radio plays and actually animate them, really do them really hardcore. Awesome,
all the Mercury Theater stuff?
Yes, yeah. I think that would be interesting, but I don't know if anybody would really care.
Well, no, but you know what? This is a good point. I mean, here's something that it freaks me out when I think of things like this. Raiders of the Lost Ark is 41 years old. So from the time that Raiders came out, it's been 41 years. right? If you go back to 1981, 41
Yes.
years before, the same amount of time it's been since Raiders was released, would have been 1940. So we hadn't even entered World War II yet. And
Right.
if you think about the distance in time and in terms of culture, the distance between 1981 and today doesn't seem nearly as far apart as 1981 felt from 1940. And
Correct.
and that I find myself grappling with this a lot, especially in fan circles. One of the things that kind of, I mean, it's just a function of getting old. You know, everyone always accuses me of being the Simpsons meme, old man shouting at clouds. I'm not quite there yet, but the one of the things I constantly think about is the distance of entertainment and time. And like, we have these franchises. Star Wars is 45 years old. Star Trek is 56 years old. Doctor Who is almost 60 years old. Bond is 60 years old this year. And the funny thing about it is, I really do believe, like, I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is done as a franchise.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that with Harrison Ford leaving the role, that is a franchise that should be put away. Now, because he is the franchise. And sure, you can go back. I feel the same way about classic Star Trek. I think it should have ended. One of the reasons I cannot stand Star Trek 09 and the J.J. Abrams reboots and now Strange New Worlds is they're rooted in the 60s, and yet they're completely untethered from any reality. They're not authentic. They don't work. I mean, I watch people like, well, Rob, Strange New Worlds is a throwback to, I'm like, no, it's not. Strange New Worlds is like the old dude, the hot older guy, and his crew of young hot chicks that are all bisexual and like alternative. And it's like he's trying. And I watch the show and I'm like, this show is completely untethered to any kind of reality. And look, I'm not. I don't even care that it's like a hot dude with a pompadour haircut that he uses way too much product on it, and all of his like sexually ambiguous female crew members. The problem with all of that is I don't believe it for a second. There is nothing in Star Trek Strange New Worlds that makes me believe that any of those people were part of any military organization at all. And the portrayal of things like the Gorn is so, it's such a ripoff of other things. There's no reality in modern Star Trek at all. And the reason I love Star Trek Picard Season 3 so much, and unless we forget, that's Terry Metallis's Trek. The reason I love Star Trek Picard Season 3 so much is it feels like, I wouldn't even call it Picard Season 3. In my own mind, Star Trek Picard Season 3 is called Star Trek The Next Generation Requiem. That's what I'm thinking about it. They should, I swear to God, they should retitle it and call it that. And because it feels authentic, because it feels like a 30 years later Next Generation movie that's 10 hours long.
Right. Well, and actually to tee up on what you're saying, and this goes back to the geek aspect or nerd, what was great about Star Trek when we were watching it unfold, like with the Next Gen, when they would refer back to, let's say, the Wrath of Khan, the uniforms or anything, you saw a progression of time. So you saw that these characters were growing old, and then, again, Rob, I'm pretty sure we could go 5 hours on the 09 and all that kind of thing. All I will add to that is saying, I agree with you. When I originally saw 09, I thought, well, that was fun. They had their Star Trek, so meaning the rest of the audience. Now let's get back to basics and let's get an actual Star Trek film next time. Rope everybody in, and then obviously that was a huge failure, but going off of what you're saying is that you had this progression of time. But not only this, one thing that people don't take in consideration, and I saw this in 2015 when we saw a Terminator film, a Ninja Turtles film, all these films come out in the single year, and everybody was like, isn't this great? And I said, no, it isn't. This isn't great. All these are going to fail because people fail to recognize that if you look at the progression, it's like you had Star Wars, it ended. Then Star Trek was going along, like the film franchise, I'm saying. They go along, you have the Terminator. Then Terminator 2 is in like 1991. It's like you had a stretch of time. Ninja Turtles came out. When you put them all in one little thing, like they're all coming out now. So you had this like a span of time between these franchises. Like one would come out, like Raiders would come out, and you know it was done right with The Last Crusade. Then you had like the Ninja Turtles films or whatever films in the 90s, and then those could die off. But now it's like we have everything, like all like in one big pile coming at you, and it's very tough. And it's like eventually some are just going to fall off to the wayside.
Well, let me ask you this, Stubble. I mean, kind of the same question. You're pretty forward thinking in your fandom. I mean, you love the Wheel of Time books. Brandon Sanderson took over, but he's also writing his own original universes. And you were telling me about his, like, the shared universes amongst his various book series and all that. How do you feel about, I don't know much about your media diet, like in terms of movies and TV stuff, but how do you feel about like these? What's so weird is when I was growing up, all of these IPs were new. They were creating things new that no one had ever seen before. Like, yeah, I grew up with Star Trek and The Twilight Zone and all that and Outer Limits. But then I got my lifetime Star Wars, Back to the Future, Alien. I mean, all of these things were brand new and they were amazing. And now I feel I can't even remember the last time. I mean, the MCU is probably it. The MCU was a new franchise that even though it gave us superhero stories that we'd read in comics, it really felt, seeing Iron Man 1 felt really new and fresh. When Nick Fury shows up at the end credits and goes, let me tell you about the Avengers Initiative, I was really excited. And for Marvel phases 1, 2, and 3, all the way through to the end of, Infinity War and Endgame, I loved the first 3 phases of Marvel because it was new. Now, The question is, why are we, I understand from a business standpoint, but I just don't understand how come we're not getting new IP. And every generation needs its own IP. And aside from Marvel, what is the new generation getting? Stranger Things, I thought, was a great new IP. Kind of the way Back to the Future was in the 80s, but Stranger Things was, it's hit and miss. But the 4th season certainly brought it back to season 1 or whatever. But it's a new IP for the modern day. Are we going to ever get a new IP again, do you think?
I think there are a couple of reasons for the lack of new IP. And the first thing is the studios are very risk averse. So they want to establish IPs. And that in turn, I think, because we talk about Star Wars, we talk about Marvel, we talk about these established IPs, and that stops the new IPs from coming forward, really. Because we have new IPs, we have Stranger Things, we have all the other stuff out there, but the fan discourse is all the old IPs is sucking up all the air, so they don't have a chance to flourish among the fan community. And then we have so much stuff coming out, so we don't rewatch things. The things that I am a fan of is things that I rewatched 15 times or read 10 times or whatever. Now we just have to, there's a new thing coming out, I must check it out. So I don't have the time to really become a fan of a new thing because there's always something new. So I think all of these things combined makes it that, because we have new IPs, but they don't take hold.
Right. You're right. I mean, it's funny. The trailer for John Wick 4 just came out, and I really like John Wick 1. John Wick 2 and 3 were fine, but it's a little, the franchise is a little thin, but it is a franchise. It is a franchise, and those movies are pretty rewatchable. The only problem is the franchise itself is thin. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of contemplation that's going to go on. You can't be very contemplative about John Wick, but the world. I mean, I would say that unfortunately, like the Matrix. I thought the Matrix, it blew me away, but the rest of the franchise didn't live up to, the Jurassic Park franchise beginning in the 90s. I mean, to me, the demarcation point is new franchises that began in the 90s, you think about that have gone on. Jurassic Park has to be one of them because there's been 6 movies, an animated show, all kinds of different things. The Matrix was a franchise I thought was pretty great and new. The first Matrix is mind-blowing, and it's great. I mean, you could say, but there, like you said, you're right. I mean, the fact that we don't watch, because when I was younger, I mean, we watched these big franchises. I'd get bootleg videotapes. You couldn't see shit, but we'd watch them over and over again, and they would live. And I have to say, of the new franchises, I of all the movies, because I get old, I'm older and don't have as much time, but I've watched both Infinity War and Endgame more times than I care to admit. Only because those movies, to me, especially like Endgame, just the opening with Hawkeye's family getting dusted and then cutting into Mr. Fantasy over the Marvel logo and then watching, like, I love the first hour of Endgame. But because all the shenanigans are fine, the battles are fine, but that's not what really interests me. I love all these characters going through the motions. I just like watching Nat and Captain America talk about the world and seeing Scott Lang find his own name on the monuments and all this. I mean, I love all that stuff, and it's great. I think it's great, and that's why it's so funny to me that I look at Phase 4 and I'm perplexed. I'm perplexed by Phase 4 because I get that they're trying to introduce things, but there's nothing in. I mean, I like Shang-Chi, but I just like the I like the relationship that they have with one another. That's just like, I would hang out with them. Like I really believe that franchises exist because we like the milieu, but it's really the people. Like I just would hang out with Han Solo. That's why I love Star Wars, because Luke and Ben. Like if I was in Ben's house, your father was a great pilot and a good friend. I'm like, let's have a drink. But I don't feel that. I mean, like you said, there's so much more stuff today. Everybody's got their own. Everyone's like, I love Outlander, I love The Crown, I love this, I love that. I mean, even for our geeks and nerddom, what do we study? What do we get? What do we love? Yeah,
I think that one of the problems with the Phase 4 for MCU is I've not sensed a sense of progress. I don't see them
there isn't
forward. No, and that's. I linked a video to you a while back about plotting, and it was a Sanderson video. He had a lecture, but it was of promises, progression, and payoff.
Yes,
and we haven't seen progress in the MCU for Phase 4. We have just seen they have just treaded water. It feels like, at least, and that makes you not interested, because you want to see, because the movie's short, they have a nice ending, I suppose, but we have been conditioned by the promises of earlier movies that we are going to have a progression for the meta story, but we haven't seen that progression. We haven't seen evidence of it. Perhaps it has been establishing things, but we haven't sensed the progression of the
I think
story.
That's a fantastic point. Because even in the end, like I said, Iron Man 1, you knew the Avengers were coming and you watched the progression. I mean, Black Widow was introduced in Iron Man 2. And, I remember Iron Man 2 was criticized because this feels like it's just a setup for more movies, and looking at it now, But what I'm more interested in is, like you said, look, I think Game of Thrones is a new franchise that people loved. My interest was killed by the 8th season, but House of the Dragon has reignited my interest in the Game of Thrones universe. Although the unfortunate thing about House of the Dragon is that there's very little you have to read to find out what's going to happen. Whereas in Game of Thrones, you had to read all these books, but House of the Dragon is very slight, and and while it's going to be great, and you could say that the details are going to be different, I do like that. I like that people love it, and I would say that other franchises that I love, but they're different because maybe I'm an adult now, but I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is a great franchise, but they're kind of over. I don't know if they'll resonate with people, but they're different. I'm not going to go, even though I do have action figures from Breaking Bad.
I would actually just like to add on to like what you guys were saying about the MCU. I think for myself, and remembering back when Iron Man came out, what the appeal was about these films when they came out was they were actually following the comics. Not to say that they should to a T, but I remember watching Iron Man and going, he's an arms dealer. I was just blown away that they were following it. Yeah. Granted, back in the day, it was Vietnam and all this stuff, but the kind of the everything, with Captain America or Thor or everything, I think they've just moved past what like somebody can make the argument that they're following the comics, but okay, Disney bought Marvel in 2012, I think, and it's like the comics they're following now are post that time. There's a big gap of material, between the original, Kirby or Stan Lee stuff to where they're going now with the new Marvel, that they could have followed or recast characters or do whatever, and actually built upon what you're saying is a progression. And actually, it just seems so far removed from what initially I like to see, because I think all of us here were used to seeing comic book films that were not based on the material. They were just like separate from it. So when we saw the MCU, it was actually very true to what those characters were. And I thought they were doing a great job of like intertwining everything. So like little things like Iron Man's his
arc reactor.
His core arc reactor had ties back to the Infinity Cube. Am I correct in that, or am I? Remember, like Loki does a little tap, and he's like, "Oh, this usually works." And when Thor like electrocutes him with the, and he powers up, like there was some ties into the universe.
Yeah.
That they were really trying to work out, because with the comics, after the fact, everybody kind of went back and tried to retcon everything, but I felt they were doing a good job of tying everything together. Moving forward, it just seems like now, with Robert Downey Jr. gone, with Chris Evans gone, with Chris Hemsworth's there, sort of, but it's like it just seems like it's like rudderless. It's just kind of moving around, trying to find who's the next person to kind of go forward with this, and it's like, it may be isolated individually. Some of these things are enjoyable, right? So, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like this big overall. And I think they're wearing themselves thin too with all these shows, to be perfectly honest.
I look, I do too. I just don't. I don't understand. Like I find. I mean, I loved WandaVision for what it was. It was so weird and
it was great.
And wacky. Yeah. I'm like, this is so insane. And Falcon and Winter Soldier, I liked a lot more than most people. Look, I'll flat out. I've said this before, but I've read the scripts for Secret Invasion. I fucking love it. Yeah. Love Secret Invasion, because Secret Invasion feels like old school. Now that we can say old school MCU, it feels Secret Invasion is
Winter Soldier.
Yeah, Secret Invasion is a sequel to the Captain America movies and Captain Marvel, in the sense that that it deals with the S.H.I.E.L.D. characters and the ramifications of what, in a really interesting way, the ramifications of what happened at the end of Captain Marvel with the Skrulls.
Right.
And Nick Fury. It's really fascinating. And I loved it.
You saying that's fine, but I will add this, being a big Fantastic Four fan. I really like. I love the scrolls. Like I love. Like that was the only thing about Captain Marvel that I loved. But I want the scrolls and the Fantastic Four together.
I know it's such a weird. Like I really
drives me
like.
crazy.
You're gonna the way the scrolls are treated in Secret Invasion is really interesting.
That's awesome.
The problem is that it's pretty far removed from. I mean, but I found it from a science fiction standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great because it's basically. I mean, I don't want to give anything away, but first of all, I love the writing in it, and it really. If you watch the trailer, when I saw the trailer, I'm like, oh, it's like the fucking scripts, like they did because it's totally a sci-fi espionage. But it's awesome. And it deals with, it had elements of things like Alien Nation in it, the Alien Nation TV series, and I mean if people know that series, because I really liked.
Rob, you got my mind spinning now. Is it a buddy cop scroll?
No. I mean what the certain factions wanted. In terms of the really interesting thing is.
They don't drink milk.
No, I can't get it. It's funny because everyone's like, Rob's gonna spoil it, but
no.
The reason somebody sent me, like what people don't understand is like, my disposition is to love this stuff. I've loved this stuff my whole life.
Yeah.
And and I'm always looking for reasons to love things even when I don't love them. I'm like, I still like. It's funny to me to watch like. When I was sitting in the theater watching Wakanda Forever, which, I think it was wildly ambitious. I liked a lot of it, but I was sitting in a theater full of people that loved it. That loved it. Great. And like I was sitting behind I was sitting in front of 10, I was saying this last night to 10 black women. They were crying, they were emotionally affected, they loved the film. And it really worked for them. And they knew nothing of geek culture or online vitriol or anything. They went in and they saw a movie that made them laugh, that made them cry, that moved them, that in a way is about their own community. And they stayed through I don't think I've ever seen as many people that stayed after the credits of a movie while the lights came up and were talking with each other about what they'd seen and what they thought and how it moved them. And I think that what our YouTube punditry community is forgetting is that these movies are made for the general audiences. They're not made. I mean, and look, they try and service the diehard fans, but they're also trying their hardest to make movies that appeal to everyone. That's why the MCU is so successful. And but with Wakanda Forever, I think that a lot of the criticism, there's a lot of people, like when you think about the circumstances around making the movie and what they had to deal with, I think there's a lot of misplaced vitriol. I mean, movies are corporate product. They're a consumer product like anything else.
Right.
But I do think people forget that there's an audience out there that isn't on YouTube, that just wants to go to the movies for 2.5 hours and be entertained. And there are people that were moved by that movie.
Yeah. And that was the problem with She-Hulk. I'm not going to get into that, but when they were actually playing into that, it's like, does the regular audience even know what they're parroting? But I would also add to what you're saying about geek and let's say general audience, because you and I, we love the motion picture, Star Trek, the motion picture, but the broad audience loves the Voyage Home. Now, when I see Black Panther, or I haven't seen Wakanda Forever, but I'm pissed because I see Namor and I associate Black Panther with the Fantastic Four. Now, this is off topic, but I want to say to you, Rob, I'm still worried about Fantastic Four because, and I think you'll understand this, I think the Fantastic Four is like Star Trek, is like Superman. There's something specific about it that they're just not going to do it because they feel it doesn't resonate with today. There's something about the Fantastic Four that's very Star Trek, and not.
Oh no,
It's tough.
I
You know
know
what I mean?
I know exactly what you're saying, and I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think that we've seen four Fantastic Four movies. If you want, by the way, I do want to say that Ron C sent in a $50 super chat, which is amazing. Thank you, Ron. But this is even more amazing. He says, "Hello, Rob. 2 days ago, I completed my 90-minute screenplay, a draft. Friday, I'm resting. Today, I watch movies for film scores. The majority of the films I watched were music made by Danny Elfman, who is a master. A master. Rob, score writer, who is on your radar?" Well, Ludwig Göransson, who scored Black Panther, and I love his scores. You're talking about new people like Junkie XL, I'm a big fan of. There is a composer, I think is a composer who has been busting his ass for 15 years. He's never really broken. I can say that I am proud to say he scored The Hills Run Red. He is one of the most talented composers in Hollywood that has never broken through to do a big feature film score. And he's a German composer named Freddie Wiedmann. And he's scored a lot of the DC Comics movies. The guy is an unbelievable talent. He's been scoring stuff for 15 years, and I'm sure people look at him and go, well, he just does TV. Well, I'll tell you, as somebody who my one and only, well, actually, that's not true. My third studio movie that I produced, but I really had a hand in producing, was The Hills Run Red, and he was our producer. He was our music. He was our composer. You can buy his soundtrack for The Hills Run Red. He made our little tiny movie sound 10 times more expensive than it was through his scoring. And I think Hollywood has been sleeping on Freddie Wiedmann. It's not like he's been working all the time, but I cannot believe he has not been tapped yet to write a gigantic score. And just buy any of his scores and listen to them. I'm particularly proud of The Hills Run Red. Hell, Ron C., if you want me to, I'll send you the CD. Although Dieter's laughing, going, no, he won't. He won't send it to you. But first of all, thanks for supporting the channel, and congratulations on the screenplay. When you're ready, I might want to read that. But you're the only one. So let me ask you this. Okay, Stubble. I got
it from.
Well, I got to ask you about. So, okay. So we saw Wheel of Time adapted. Yeah. One of your favorite things in the world. They're going into a second season, and I liked Wheel of Time. I didn't, you sent me the first book, which, by the way, I've finished. I've read the entire first Wheel of Time book, and it's great. The Wheel of Time, that first Wheel of Time book is great. I can honestly say that it's a great. I can understand the appeal of Jordan's work now. But looking back now at Wheel of Time, how did you feel about the adaptation, and what are you feeling about it moving forward?
Okay. This is a very complicated question that I will try to give a simple answer to, but I'm not sure I will manage. But when I first watched it, I was shocked about some of the changes that were made. So that it shocked my system a little bit.
Right.
They did things that I didn't expect. So I had to watch it again to just judge it by itself. So I will say that for me, they exist as two separate things.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I understand some of the changes they made, because it's impossible to adapt a book series that's as long as the Harry Potter, the Lord of the Rings, the Song of Ice and Fire, and the Bible, and some other things combined. So you have to cut a lot of things, and you have to adapt a lot of things. I understand that completely. and I know why they moved up certain storylines and they moved back other storylines. So, but I didn't like some things they did with some characters. I didn't like what they did with Perrin, for example. I understand why they did it, but I didn't really like what they did. And I didn't like what they did with Matt's parents, really. Otherwise, I think it was pretty okay. I would give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay. Well, now I want to. My follow-up question is really. So everyone right now is looking for these IPs to adapt, and obviously fantasy was big because of Lord of the Rings. It's never really gone away. Lord of the Rings and then Game of Thrones. Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones proved the viability of epic fantasy on screen. And everybody wants to find their Game of Thrones or their Lord of the Rings. Here's the problem that I see. The people, I think there are very few people in the world that understand these fantasy projects enough to adapt them to films and TV. They don't have the time. They don't have the budgets. They also don't have the people with the understanding of what made the shows great in the first place. I mean, one of the things that I'll flat out say I really liked House of the Dragon, but George R.R. Martin is the co-creator of the show with Ryan Condal, who's the showrunner now. The two of them created that show. So it's not like George R.R. Martin was not consulting. He has the credit as co-creator of the show with the now showrunner of the show. Miguel Sapochnik left, so it worked. I mean, however you feel about House of the Dragon, I think it was a resounding success in what it did. But all of these other projects, and I find it incredibly Rings of Power, and I'm just gonna say, I mean, I'm not going to talk about it agenda-wise. It's terrible. It's a terrible show that everything about it is creatively bankrupt. And I forget agendas or representation or any of that. I'm talking about it strictly from a creative standpoint. And the one thing that I will use as an example is the Harfeet. They figured, well, we have to have hobbits. How can we have hobbits? There's no fucking hobbits in the Second Age of Middle Earth. And so they had to, so immediately the show completely threw any credibility out the window because the people that were making the show figured, well, I mean, we can't do a Lord of the Rings show without the hobbits. And if the strangers Gandalf, it's like, fuck you. Because seriously, I mean, it's the kind of thing where, I'm trying to watch and see what they're doing. But that series is it's creatively bankrupt, where they were looking at it like, well, we have to make it like Lord of the Rings. First of all, it shouldn't have been called Lord of the Rings. No, I understand. It should have been called something like Legend of Middle Earth or whatever the fuck they call it. But because the Lord of the Rings story is a Third Age story. The Second Age story about the first War of the Ring is a different story. Yeah. And
even that, like what drives me crazy about Power of the Rings is you have a property that is, like, I remember back in the day, you like with geek stuff, you had Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever. There's tiers. So there's like Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. I remember we went over to a buddy's house and he had a Lord of the Rings sketch, like from one of the paperbacks, and I said, this guy's really hardcore. So meaning that is the Lord of the Rings fan base is very particular about how that operates.
And by the way, that fan base was around, I mean, 60s.
Exactly.
They're
exactly
back in the day, yo.
And so, like, they would have been just better off to create it, because like when you have elves and all this other stuff, they're actually very generic kind of fantasy kind of archetypes that you can use. They could have actually going back to what you were saying, Rob, about new franchises. Actually, I think Amazon would have been they could have actually created a new franchise if they would have said, this is ours. Sure, there would have been the naysayers that come out and say, oh, this is Lord of the Rings ripoff or whatever. But they would have actually saved themselves the scrutiny and to actually do whatever. And it would have freed them a little bit. It would have actually freed them to not be so, even though they went off track, but to not actually base themselves in that. But it's like, it's crazy, you know, like these things and it's like, who is this for? You know what I mean? It goes, who's this for?
And I have some thoughts about the Harfoots as well.
Please.
I will limit myself to the Harfoots.
No, go ahead, say what you want. It's not like a member call. You can say what you want.
No, but they are stupid. Not the individuals, but as a group, because
yes,
we are so few. We are traveling. We must take care of each other to survive. All of that, but as soon as someone gets injured, they have to fend for themselves.
It's just terrible.
So how have they survived? And because we are so few, we have to take care of each other. But oh well, he's gone now because he had a bad. I mean, shouldn't they cooperate?
Well, I mean, the thing about I don't think I've ever seen a show. Rings of Power was a show where, and I tried to like it because we had to talk about it, and I didn't want to just, you know, on the show we're doing after shows, and I was trying to give it a chance. And I was immersed in Middle Earth for years of my life because I was working on the special features for the Lord of the Rings extended version DVDs, and so we all were, I mean, when we say immersed, we were fucking immersed in Lord of the Rings. And it was really weird to watch that show because it felt like no one who made Rings of Power was immersed in, I felt no Tolkien in it at all. I felt like it was somebody making a show about Lord of the Rings that was like 4 times removed from Tolkien's work, who never actually read it. And now I understand that they did not have the rights to the Legendarium and the Silmarillion and the all Beren and Luthien or whatever the fuck they didn't have the rights to. But then why make that show? Like, you had the rights to do Lord of the Rings. What I don't understand is it would have been more interesting for the audience is if they did Lord of the Rings but closer to the books, where it was like 60 fucking years when Gandalf left Bilbo's party and went away to find out about the ring and came back. Tom Bombadil, add the songs and the poems and actually spend 10 hours doing each book, because that's what they have the rights to do. Or even more, go back and do The Hobbit, like redo them, but do them in a television, kind of like the way I would equate it is, this is a terrible analysis and people are going to, maybe I'll lose all credibility, but there was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie with Christy Swanson. Now I'm not comparing Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Lord of the Rings, but what I am saying is Joss Whedon, that movie was not entirely successful, but then they turned it into a very successful TV show that told the story over the course of multiple seasons of television. And what Amazon bought the rights to was Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the appendices in Lord of the Rings. So then they decided to make a movie in the Second Age, and they don't have the rights to make all that stuff into their show. And that's the way they went. And now they're trying to take stuff from Lord of the Rings and poach it and put it into the Second Age, which is so weird to me. Like, why did they think that was ever going to work? Mordor was not created in the Second Age by some Rube Goldbergian device that sent water to lava. And Mordor was created in the First Age. And it's like, I'm watching.
They give their prized IP to two showrunners that have no record, have done nothing of import. But I think also that the studio was heavily involved with, 50 people coming with ideas and suggestions, and it's all too many cooks, and it all becomes
Arrogance,
a big
too.
mess.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because I'm always banging on about authorship, and you look at the great TV shows or whatever, the Vince Gilligan's responsible. I mean, yeah, he has a writing staff. Is responsible for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Star Trek Picard season 3, you had a showrunner in Terry Matalas who was given free reign to do what he wanted, and I because nobody believes me. And they're like, Rob, you hate Star. And nobody. I'm like, as I've told everyone, I'm like, look, man, give Star Trek Picard season 3 30 minutes, maybe 35.
I'm excited.
If you're not in 35 minutes in it, if you don't see how different it actually is, and there's one cut to a. All I can say is there's one cut to a funny thing that happens to Riker and Picard. Suddenly you're like, oh, I'm watching Star Trek again, and
wow.
you'll be in, and then when it unfolds, you'll be in, and you'll get to episode 4 and you'll be practically weeping, and then in episode 5 you'll be going no fucking way, and episodes 9 and 10 you'll see, and it's
I
like,
can't wait.
And I just I find what I find so interesting is I think, like with so much of our civilization right now, there are not a lot of people that are educated enough to do what we need them to do. And when I say educated, I don't mean that, well, I do mean that they don't have the knowledge they need to make the things that they're tasked with making. And it's really frustrating. And I sometimes I feel that, like with Wheel of Time, with what you said, Stubble, and now after having read the first book, I really felt like, I'm like, did everybody who's working on this show, the showrunners and writers, did they read all of this material? I mean, no, I really wonder, because I'm like, it seemed like a very simplistic distillation of a lot of things that was tinged with, it's like, nah, we've seen all this fantasy stuff. We can just make it. And the whole point of what made Wheel of Time so interesting was Wheel of Time, was all the differences that wasn't like everything else. The stuff that was really interesting, that made it different from Terry Brooks or Stephen R. Donaldson or Tolkien or whomever. Yeah. And I felt that the people that are adapting this stuff, I feel like they're not doing the work. They're not.
Well,
reading.
they're not.
They're not doing the work, man. And I can tell.
Yeah.
I can tell.
Well, you're correct. You're correct in that, Rob. And you've actually said this multiple times prior to that. Like, even going back to, let's say, the first season of the original Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, and also his creative team, they enlisted sci-fi writers, like the real, hardcore guys. It's like nowadays you get TV people who are immersed in TV. They don't,
and that's all they've ever been immersed in. They haven't read they haven't read the books. They haven't read Western canon literature. They haven't read sci-fi and fantasy. They haven't done shit.
If you're doing a Star Trek show, let's say today, let's say if you and we were doing a Star Trek show today, and we were like, let's get like the most hardcore, groundbreaking sci-fi people, like just authors. Let's get them in here and just have them write an episode. Let's see what it is. Like, of course, we'll craft it to how it'll form to the show, like Harlan Ellison. Like,
we'll rewrite what they've written.
And like craft it to what it is. Because a lot of people don't remember this. The original Star Trek was more of an anthology show with a carryover with a crew. You know this, Rob. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Of course. You're to me, you are. Actually, I just want to say to you, thank you so much for all your work on all the DVD extras with the Lord of the Rings, everything, because I will tell you, I'm of that, I'm a physical media guy, so I wanted to thank you for that, because I just picked this. I didn't pick it up because
you got to show the fog. You can't just Oh, look at that.
Yeah, no, it's because I didn't have these during Halloween. I was like, oh, I want to watch Creepshow, but I got to get that new version, and I picked it up. But anyways, my point being is, I love those features, and also you said too, your friend was the guy that did the Blade Runner.
Yeah, Charlie Lauzarica.
Yeah, I got that suitcase at home, and if you ever see him, I doubt you'll remember. Just tell him I love that, and I've watched it multiple times. That and the Alien quadrilogy. Anyways,
isn't that his documentary on the Blu-ray? Oh. The Blu-ray documentary on Alien 3 is amazing.
Oh, that was my first. That was the first thing I did. I got that for Christmas, and I popped Alien 3 second disc.
Because he was able to change, because they made him cut a bunch of shit out of it for the DVD, but the Blu-ray is incredible.
Oh, I love that. But anyways, going back to what you were saying, it's just these writers, they don't know the Western canon, they don't know. And like when we look at these really good adaptations, like Jackson's Lord of the Rings, or even the recent Dune. Like I'm a big Dune fan, and you know what? Dune is something that I feel that there's been a few adaptations where you can kind of do your own spin, but it was great to see something that was a little bit more truer, but at the same time, there is this like balance that you got to find, but you can feel that they have an appreciation and a reverence for the original material. You can tell when someone hasn't done their homework. I'm not going to hire somebody to, fix the pipes and they haven't done their homework.
No,
you know what I mean?
And I think we have a lot of that. I mean, look, I work in the industry, and I've been here for a long time, and I've never had my fandom and my professional career because I have not buckled down the way some people have. I've kept like I like living. Look, would I have liked to have made? Do I want to direct another movie? Yes. Do I want to make a big commercial movie? Sure. But nowadays, cinema does not mean what it meant 25 years ago.
No,
it doesn't, and it's in one ear and out the other. And even if my goal in life, my first goal in life was to direct a movie when I was 30. I did that. My next goal in life is I would like to make 4 more movies, so I have a total of 5 films in my life, and all the other stuff I get to do, which is fun. It's Dota Dragon's Blood. Mm-hmm. I love doing that. 24 episodes of a fantasy animated show. I'd never worked. It was great. I'm working on a movie now called The White Devils that people will see. Tango Shalom got blessed by the Pope, which is fucking crazy. So I've done all this stuff that is gratifying for me. But I would say this: everything I've ever worked on, I knew my shit. I would never. It was, and the people, a lot of the people that get hired to do these things, especially franchise IPs, which is, it's shocking to me to see people that get hired. Like, if you went and applied for a job for a company, unless you knew a lot about you wouldn't get hired. But in this day and age, I feel that a lot of our IPs, because the people in charge, call them the gatekeepers, if you will, they're looking at a spreadsheet that shows the credits of the people. Well, this person worked on this, so of course they're good. I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. I'm like, those credits can tell you the person knows how to write. But if you're going to work on my fucking IP, I'm going to bring you in here, and I'm going to grill you beyond. I mean, you want to tell me about Star Trek, you better fucking know. Because if you don't, why the fuck are you in the room working on this property? And I feel a lot of the time, I look at these guys and the people that are working on this stuff, I'm like, this is a fucking clown car of people that were hired, and I get why they were hired. And I'm like, what the fuck do you know about this IP? Why are you have not read these books. You don't know about this IP. You've not read the extended universe. You don't know the comics. You do not have a working knowledge of any of this. So why are you writing it? By the way, if you're writing Star Trek, if you are not a science fiction fan, and if you haven't read speculative fiction, like, look, I'm very excited. Octavia Butler, who is a female black science fiction writer, we interviewed her. Like, she has her own universe. There's a series coming out, Kindred, that's based on one of her seminal works. I saw a trailer for it the other day. I forgot. I knew it was getting made. I didn't realize it had been so close to being done. I'm like, we as a fan community, I certainly hope, it's not just about representation on screen. It's the fact that Octavia Butler as a black female, I guess, I mean, I don't know enough about her personal life to call her anything but black and female. She was just a great science fiction writer. And the fact that Kindred is coming out, I am seeing nothing. The trailer was dropped. All these people that are promoting diversity and all this, I'm like, where the fuck are you people at promoting Octavia Butler's Kindred? Where are, you know what? They don't fucking know about it. Why don't they know about it? Because they don't do their research, and this performance activism pisses me off.
Yeah.
Here we have Octavia Butler. They adapted Kindred. It's coming out. No one is talking about it. So that's why when everyone talks about I'm like, fuck you. You people don't know shit. You don't know anything. Exactly. And I'm tired of it. Or as Chris Rock would say, tired. I mean,
I just wanted to say, Rob, too, like what you were saying, it's not only that you have to know your stuff, let's say expanded universe. The most successful, let's say, creators that came out past the original conception. So like Nick Meyer, he knew Horatio Hornblower.
Right.
Or Dave Filoni, who's, very popular amongst fandom, he watched Kurosawa films. It's not about just watching Star Wars or Star Trek.
George Lucas didn't have Star Wars to watch. Yeah. He watched other things.
Right. So he, and George Lucas gave Dave Filoni a list of things. He's like, George Lucas is famous for actually throwing people out of the writers' rooms for saying, you got that encyclopedia, get out of here. That's written by a German guy, or something like that. Some weird story, where it's like, you go to the source. So if I was going to go write something, it's like, what's the inception of this? Because it has something that traces back, right? So you go back to that, so you know your stuff. And that way you can, that's why The Mandalorian is so, sorry to interrupt, but I want to say that's why The Mandalorian, I feel, is somewhat more successful, is because not only does it take from, let's say, the Japanese, lone wolf and cub, but it's utilizing TV, like Incredible Hulk, structure, or whatever it is, episodic 70s. It's granted, it's not probably what the, a lot of, I think a lot of fans like the Andor, like darker kind of thing, but there's something about it that they knew how to craft it and move it forward. It's not just, that's why I think Obi-Wan and some of these other ones are not as successful, right? Oh. It's like cover band stuff.
I mean, the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi were embarrassingly bad, and it's shocking. Now, Stubble, I have to ask you: have you been watching Andor?
Yes.
I would love to hear your take on the show. What do you think?
Oh no, it's a masterclass in storytelling. It's great.
I think so too. You had the letter earlier about lean back or lean forward. Right. I love that.
This is a lean forward. You have to pay attention to what's happening.
Yes, 100%.
And there's so many small details that easily missed if you're not paying attention. That's really telling. And I absolutely love it. I don't have an essay ready for you.
No. But I'm curious. I mean, as somebody like, look, you're a literary man, so you understand. I find Andor to be it's very interesting. It's interesting because, I never thought that I would ever see something like Andor come out of the Star Wars universe. But as somebody who has sampled so many different kinds of stories, stories about World War II, and I never thought that I would think of one of my favorite filmmakers, Jean-Pierre Melville, who made a French resistance movie called Army of Shadows. I never would have thought that I ever would have been thinking about Jean-Pierre Melville and Star Wars in the same sentence. But I do. And I hark back to so many different kinds of things when I watch Andor, and it's so crazy. We've only got 2 more episodes, but I look at it and it's like, I don't even, again, I wonder, people always yell about Kathleen Kennedy, but she also greenlit this show. And I'm like, clearly, I mean, you have an Academy Award-winning screenwriter who's also a director, Tony Gilroy, who's the showrunner of this show. And I feel like Nicholas Meyer doing Star Trek 2, Tony Gilroy, he's even said, I'm not making a Star Wars show. I'm making a show that just happened to be set in the Star Wars universe. And he's right. And it's I mean, to me, it's so far, even The Mandalorian. I mean, sure, is the Mandalorian is like candy. It's fun. It's this is Star Wars literature. And I what's funny is I think in our brains and our minds, we geeks and nerds, we think of Star Wars as literature in our minds. But what we really want to watch is the candy version of Star Wars. We want the lightsabers.
You would know this better, Rob. You would know this actually too. A lot of the literary, like sci-fi people, they actually did not like that the Star Wars people were kind of coming in, like I'm saying in that.
Oh, you mean in the beginning? Oh, they hate.
Yeah,
they hated what happened. A lot of people don't understand this because they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Most conventions were literary conventions. It was science fiction fans were all literary because there were not very many good science fiction movies, and these literary people did not think Star Wars was good either. Because it was space fantasy.
Read Harlan Ellison's review.
I mean, Harlan Ellison didn't even come around till Empire, but and even then it was reluctantly. But it was. Gentlemen, listen.
I love the fact he loved David Lynch's Dune, so that's funny.
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring
things.
on. Go ahead, Stubble.
2 things. I will say Andor is surprising all the time. I'm surprised. I can't see things coming all the time, which I often can with most things.
Me too.
Surprising but inevitable. It's some kind of word. But the other thing I just wanted to mention that this past week I've been a nerd who's done nerdy things, listening to a nerd talking nerdy stuff about a nerd.
Wait,
I've been I've been listening to the origins of Wheel of Time, the book that the big nerd.
So it's a guy who's writing a book about the books, an analysis of the books, and you've been listening to him
and about the author.
Okay, I salute you, sir, because that's what this show's all about. That's about you're listening to podcasts written by a guy who's writing or done by a guy who's writing a book about the guy who wrote the book about the thing. That's the best thing ever.
I'm listening to the audiobook because I haven't gotten the physical books yet. Anyway, I just want to.
I would say God bless you, Stubble, because that's what this show.
Yeah.
I mean, look, man, we're all. What's so funny is the first letter I read about. How do I explain to people why I like this stuff? And I think what it really comes down to is all of us are questing, through our lives about our existence. We're trying to reflect on what does it mean to be a human being? And like I've said this on the show many times, that we all are looking for the reality in our make-believe. And our realities, the better our make-believe is, the things that are not real are made better if reality is injected into them. And I think science fiction, fantasy, horror, genre literature, thrillers, mysteries, spies, whatever your jam is, fiction is always better when it's full of truth.
Yeah.
And that's all we're looking for is we're all looking for, whether it's a superhero story, whether it's a Star Trek story, a Doctor Who story, a Game of Thrones story, whatever it is, we are looking for stories that are truthful. And what happens is there are a lot of when corporate interests are involved, they don't understand that about storytelling at all. They're just like, okay, we bought a brand, Doctor Who, so now we're going to hire, there's a list of 20 creators that doesn't matter what it is. We're going to hire them because they're safe. They've made money. No one's going to have a problem. That's why I can't understand why Payne and What's-His-Face were hired as the showrunners for the most expensive TV show of all time.
Then you will appreciate this. I don't know if this was from the audiobook or from the interviews I've seen the author do, but this is the thing. Just a small thing about all. You know, Jordan had notes that was more words than the book series. So you had, and the book series is 4.5 million words. And so his notes was more extensive than that. And one piece of notes that are of interest is he had a list of how each tree, each bark felt. And he had a list of if he had two sticks of different types of woods, which would dent the other. And he had lists of all these things just to make the world immersive.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the work that needs to be done. You have to ask those questions. And that's why the Wheel of Time has survived as it has.
Yeah. So he, I can recommend the book. It's full of spoilers, just so you know. So, but I think you would appreciate it, and they just touch on the surface because it was limited to a certain number of pages, so they couldn't fill it with everything. But if you want to know interesting things about an author, you can check that out.
Well, gentlemen, I'm gonna see if I can bring some more ne'er-do-wells on. I want to thank you both for coming on the show. This was amazing. Binary Sunset Media, all up in there in Saskatoon, and Stubble.
Regina.
You're in Regina now. Yes, and
Rob. Sorry, Rob. I just wanted to say too, it's a great pleasure to actually get to talk with you because growing up, skateboarding and things, I remember seeing an ad for a film called Free Enterprise, and I was like, "What is this film? What is this film?" Because back like the internet was around, but I was like, because it looked like the Generations kind of thing or whatever.
Yeah, boy, do I wish we had the internet now. We would have been rich.
I was like, what is this? What is this? But I just, before you let me go, I wanted to say too, I think going back to what you were saying, and I want to hear your thoughts on the Fantastic Four. I think one of the key elements that is missing now with these key franchises is when you have Star Wars or any of these things, they say, write us a Star Wars film, where George Lucas said, I want to make this, or Stan Lee said, I want to tell this story, the Fantastic Four, or Gene Roddenberry said, I want to tell this story. We need some risks. We need the people to be like, this is something that I want to tell, and it connects with the audience. The separation now is we have, like you've said a million times, the corporations say, hire us, so-and-so to write us the Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what you are looking for is you are looking for people that are passionate about the franchise they're going to work in. Now, this to me seems like it's common sense. The problem with all of these IPs, and the problem is really it's twofold. It's the fact that it's really expensive to make any of these things, and you're dealing with now entities. George Lucas wanted to make Flash Gordon. He couldn't get the rights, so he made Star Wars instead, based on and it became his own. Everyone knows the story. The problem with all of this now is that all of these franchises that were the product, Doctor Who and Terry Nation, or take your pick, any of these franchises, is now they're all owned by corporations that have hiring structures that make sense. It's like, okay, we now have to look at people, they're Ivy League educated or they're business people. Those are the people we're going to hire as our executives. And then we're going to look at, if we're going to hire somebody to make a $100 million movie, a corporation can't do anything but hire other people that have handled $100 million franchises before. The only person in Hollywood, and I've worked in this business for 30 years now, the only person who has ever bucked this trend is Kevin Feige. And maybe Steven Spielberg when he hired Colin Trevorrow Colin Trevorrow to direct Jurassic World. The guy had made Safety Not Guaranteed. He loved that movie, and he was directly responsible for getting Colin Trevorrow hired. That never happens. But the fact that you have Kevin Feige is able to hire people. James Gunn had made Slither for $3 million and Super for $3 million. Work within the studio system. There is no reason why James Gunn should have been hired to direct Guardians of the Galaxy. The only reason, the Russo brothers.
Right.
Welcome to Collingwood, and TV. It's because Kevin Feige is the only guy that went, you know what? That guy knows how to tell a story. I'm going to hire them. Or those people know how. And most of the time it's worked because the Russo brothers and James Gunn it worked. Ryan Coogler. People say, well, Ryan Coogler is black. That's why he directed Black Panther. I'm like, Ryan Coogler had directed 2 movies before Black Panther. He did Fruitvale Station, which is terrific. But what I think Ryan Coogler did that a lot of people never give him credit for is he took a moribund franchise like Rocky. He took a fucking franchise that was 40 fucking years old, and he was like, I have an idea. What balls?
Hardcore established.
He went to fucking Sylvester fucking Stallone. I've never met Ryan Coogler. I don't know Ryan Coogler, but I have to say one of my favorite things anyone has ever done in Hollywood is Ryan Coogler going to Sly Stallone, going, "Mr. Stallone, I've got an idea to make a new Rocky movie, and you'll be a supporting character in it." And he. Look, I really liked The Critical Drinker, and he and I had a really interesting conversation about Creed, which he didn't dig. But I bought into what he said. I agreed with him. I disagree with the fact I still think the movie's great. But the fact that Ryan Coogler did that, and you know why he did it? Because he fucking loved the Rocky franchise. And he made a great movie out of Creed, which showed he could work in someone else's universe.
Well, it actually stuck within the Rocky format, though. It actually stuck within the Rocky format. So, and you're going to let us go, and I wanted to say, Rob, before you let me go, you want to make these films, you got my sword. So just say the hey, my steel. So you want to make these films happen, man. I'm telling you right now, I've followed you since like a lot of the other projects I've been watching. I'm a effects guy, whatever it is. Just to let you know.
Are you a Canadian?
Are you
Canadian in
Yes, I am.
Okay, one of my dream projects is written by a Canadian science fiction writer.
Okay, well,
we've got to get him on board.
Oh, actually, Rob, while I got you though too, I have a channel. Not to put you on the spot, I know you're a very busy man, but I just interviewed Paul Chetto. Would you?
Of course.
Be open to coming on the channel?
I really want to.
What do I do?
Yeah, I'll do it. Just send me an email or DM me. I really want to stream with Paul. I like Paul. Although I gotta say, Paul's sliding into the, the clickbait.
He is. But Paul, I'll say this about Paul. I'll defend him a little slightly because Paul actually, it's weird about Paul. He's actually a Canadian. He has an established Canadian history in sketch comedy. He was on Four on the Floor. I told him that. And it blew me away that he was on YouTube. I was like, I can't believe I'm actually talking to you right now. His friend, Rick Green, did a show called Prisoners of Gravity. It was the first geek show. This was probably the precursor to the entire YouTube sphere. Look it up sometime, Rob, if you've never seen it. There's some Harlan Ellison interviews on YouTube where he interviewed Harlan Ellison about the Terminator lawsuit. He basically does a YouTube show. This is in probably the early 90s, 80s. And it just talked about comic books. He had Alan Moore on this show, blew my mind.
Wow.
Like, I couldn't believe somebody was actually talking about comic books, The Watchmen, sci-fi. Paul Chato said, unfortunately, a lot of that, his show is owned by a third party, so he can't actually post it or release it. But that show had crazy interviews, Neil Gaiman, all these people in the heyday. Look it up sometime, Rob. It is mind-blowing, because I know, because a lot of people take it for granted what we talk about now, but to actually see it on TV.
I'll look it up. I mean, I really like Paul. I can't wait to talk to him. I texted with him tonight.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Stubble, do you have some parting words before I boot you both off and bring on some late night ne'er-do-wells now that it's the witching hour?
Well, I can say this, that we used to talk about movies after we've seen them. Now we talk about movies before we've seen them, and not so much after.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I love the ankle. That Jodora. Oh, man. Well, gentlemen, Binary Sunset Media, thank you so much. Stubble, good to see you. And I'm going to let you both go. And I'm going to bring on whoever's next. Who the hell knows? I don't know. So, gentlemen, as they say in the village, be seeing you. Well, thank you. Thank you both. That was great to have them on here. Let's see. Let's see who's here. We got some people here. We got somebody. Oh, there's people here. We got Siam. Although I can't see them. And Scripty is here. Yes. All right. This is gonna be fun. Is it Sam? Sam? I don't know. I can't see you. Can't hear you. But Scripty, can you hear me? I can hear. Scripty, can you hear me? Are you there? I can only hear myself, so I can't put you guys in yet. Well, I'll just, I think, hang on a second. I hope you guys are getting ready. Just don't leave. I'll put you on. I'm going to, we have a Taylor Butters sends in a super chat and says, "Hi, Rob, longtime fan from Tasmania. I wondered if you'd seen Chef. If so, what are your thoughts? Have you seen Barbarian yet? If so, what do you think?" Well, first of all, Chef, are you talking about the Jon Favreau film, which I have and I really liked it? And I've also, he's doing his show as well based on the film. So that's cool. I like that. And I love Barbarian. I was a big fan of that. I had read the script before I saw the movie, so I'm actually a huge Barbarian fan. I really liked it a lot. I thought it was a hoot. Made for $4 million in Bulgaria, where we made actually $4.5 million, where we made The Hills Run Red. Jaimin D sends in a tip and says, "Rob, if people ever proof of positive fandom, I present to you Bud Spencer and Terrence Hill Slaps and Beans, the video game. Laugh out loud. There's a studio who made a game based on them. Really? Bud Spencer and Terrence Hill Slaps and Beans. Even after 45 years, someone still hasn't forgotten their love for Bud and Terrence." Jaimin, you know what I love about you? You always hit me to things I didn't know. Like you, my friend, have a wide breadth of pop culture knowledge that is indispensable. So, Bud Spencer and Terrence Hill Slaps and Beans. Wow, that's amazing. This is a blind spot for me. Now I'm intrigued. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. A Silly Goose sends in a tip and says, This last episode of Andor was nothing less than phenomenal. Oh my God. Luthen's speech gave me major goosebumps. I share my dream with ghosts. In that statement, we learn all his friends are dead. And man, when Kino said, can't swim, my heart broke, great show. Here's the thing. Is Luthen a Jedi? I think he is. I mean, even Tony Gilroy was saying in an interview that the art department was always sneaking in stuff that he didn't know. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, Tony Gilroy? You got Jedi and Sith holocrons. Come on now. In Luthen's shop. I think he's a Jedi. What do you guys think? I don't know. Don't know. We'll see. So script. Are you there? Siam, are you there? I can't hear you guys. I don't know if maybe they don't know that they're here. They don't know that they were in. I'm gonna keep them hanging there. Or you know what? Well, I don't know what to say. They don't seem to be there. So, well, I don't know what to tell them. We'll see. Well, they're both back. Well, I can't bring them on yet. They don't seem to be there. Well, Scripty, and if you guys are there, I'll bring you on. Hold up. Sam Sugart says, thoughts on Mr. Miracle and Kirby's Fourth World. I'm a huge fan. As a matter of fact, that reminds me, I need to get the Fourth World Volume 2 Absolute Edition. Look, to me, so for those of you who don't know, when Jack Kirby came over to DC, he basically created his Fourth World where Darkseid came from, the New Gods, New Genesis and Apocalypse, Orion, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, Granny Goodness, all those characters Kirby created when he came to DC. And it was a really interesting cosmology he created in the pages of Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. I mean, crazy stuff. And I love it. I mean, I love it. I've got his omnibuses, and I need to get, I'm always reminded, I always forget. I have the first Absolute Fourth World. I need to get the second. But I'm a fan, Sam. And also, by the way, James Gunn, Commandy. Come on now. Let's do a Commandy series. You know what I'm saying? Love to see it. I'm sure James Gunn doesn't need me to tell him to do that, but how cool would a Commandy series be? Wouldn't it be cool? I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be very cool. But anyway, hang on. Let's see. Is Scripty here? I don't know if Scripty, are you here? Siam, are you here? I can't hear you guys. I don't know. I don't know. I can't hear you at all, which is strange. I can hear you guys listening to me, but I can't hear you guys. Anyway, well, Scripty, you know what? I'll tell you what. I'm going to end this show now. Why not? Why not end it on a high note? I think I've answered everyone's questions. All the super chats are done. Why not end it? Because, it's 12 o'clock for real. Listen, I want to thank all of you for watching this episode 819. You imagination connoisseurs of Robservations. Thank you for watching the show. I want to thank my moderating staff. Lord Toth was here. Tom Jr. Jackson. He who coined the phrase, "We are all goof people." Thank you so much. And everybody who watched. Brian Hepburn was here with the Wielding the Blue Wrench. Thank you so much for that. So thank my great moderating staff. I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel via Super Chats, tips, and, of course, memberships. Now, for those of you, I want to give a shout-out to Alex Montano and to Roberto Suarez. They put out the second episode of what was going to be called Latin X-Men, but there was too much pushback. So now we have a new show called Que Pasa BGS, and you can watch that. It was a live show that dropped this morning, and if you don't speak Spanish, it's a show that's all in Spanish. But there's also a PSA on this channel into how you can translate that show into any language on Earth. So check it out. No matter where you live around the world, check out Que Pasa PGS? Vatos Locos Forever. So that's blood in, blood out. Watch the show, and congratulations to Roberto Suarez and Alex Montano for doing that show. It was amazing. Thank you so much. And, all that. Remember. Bon Necron 444 says, I tried to get in, Rob, but the chat was full. Maybe next week. Well, Bon, yes, I'll do it next week. I don't know what was going on. I couldn't hear anyone. But you know what? You can see us tomorrow, Dieter Bastian and myself, for Let's Get Physical Media, where we talk about physical media and the movies that came out and the week that was. So all of that and a bag of chips. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everyone, have a better night. And this was Robservations 819. And it goes out to all of you imagination connoisseurs in the post-geek singularity. See you, well, it is tomorrow, so see you later.